Welcome to part 2 of the Resident Evil story series. Now, the last one was a wild ride, as we covered Umbrella's origins all the way through to Resident Evil Code Veronica. We covered a lot in the last video. If you didn't catch that one, then the link to it is up there. Anyway, in this video we'll be covering the years 2002 all the way through to 2013. And that's 8 games, their respective DLCs, and a couple of the CGI movies too. So yeah, got a lot to cover here. I won't waffle on too much as I want to get straight into it, but don't worry, I'll be providing context for certain situations where relevant. As mentioned in the last video as well, the lore for this franchise is so vast that there will be things I'll skip over and not talk about, but these will only really be minor points that won't affect the narrative. These include things such as comics, manga, and maybe certain parts of the Umbrella Chronicles. But let's jump back in again. We need to start by focusing on the fallout when it came to Umbrella and a very important public trial. After Raccoon City's destruction and its subsequent sterilization by the US government, wiping out 100,000, heads needed to roll. I mean, the sterilization served a secondary purpose too, and that was to remove any evidence of the US government's own ties to Umbrella. US Congress would start by passing a decree that the government would suspend any activity or trade with Umbrella, so Umbrella sued the US government. The president eventually resigned as public scrutiny was rising in regard to his handling of this horrific event, and many actually put those 100,000 deaths on the government and the thermobaric bombing of the city rather than the actions and carelessness of Umbrella themselves. Many people thought this stunk of a cover-up. A journalist called Alyssa Ashcroft, who herself was caught up in the chaos of the Raccoon City outbreak, wrote an expose on Umbrella, and her article was titled "What is a BOW?", blowing the lid off of this horrifying secret project. And this article really piqued the public's interest in the trial. But Umbrella, well, they weren't going to go down without a fight. Oswell E. Spencer hired the best lawyers money could buy, who themselves turned the focus onto the US government and the bombing of the city as proof that the government were trying to direct public outrage and manufacture a conspiracy. Evidence wasn't easy to come by since Umbrella had done a pretty decent job of erasing any sign of their own wrongdoing, but the trial would commence nonetheless, and what would come next was one big blame game with fingers being pointed at as many people as possible. The trial itself would be hampered too by politicians and senior people in the government who were involved in the dealings with Umbrella, refusing to testify in the trial, as was their right, and Oswell E. Spencer would prepare false witnesses to testify in court as a way to guide the public towards blaming the government. Umbrella were also a senior member of the Federation of Pharmaceutical Companies, although to be fair, the FPC did not know that it was helping Umbrella produce bioweapons. Umbrella is just, or was, part of the Federation as a producer and supplier of pharmaceutical products. The FPC made a deal with prosecutors in the trial in that they would be allowed to carry on in their business if they supplied evidence to the courts. Another company that gave evidence and testified against Umbrella in court was TRICELL, who themselves had a pharmaceutical arm within their own company, and they were also members of the FPC. But the damage of this very public court case and the length it was dragging on for was showing, and Umbrella were on the verge of financial collapse. But there was something else that had damaged Umbrella's chances in this case, and that was what was to come next. Now, I need to preface this next section by saying that the canonicity of this game has been a subject of debate ever since the Resident Evil 4 remake came out, all thanks to a certain and rather unnecessary file found in that game. Despite this, I am including Operation Javier in the video because it's still a fairly decent story and adds some information around a character in RE4. But let's continue on. After the destruction of Raccoon City and during the Raccoon Trials, something called the Antivirus Weapon Protocol number 7600 was brought in. This antivirus weapon protocol is essentially an executive order that aims for complete removal and destruction of any bioweapons like the T and G viruses. After what happened in Raccoon City, the US government wanted to ensure that nothing like this could ever happen again. I mentioned in part 1 that during the Raccoon City incident, Claire met a young girl named Sherry, who was the daughter of William Birkin, the guy who created the G virus, and his wife, also an Umbrella researcher called Annette. Claire, Sherry and Leon all managed to escape the city. Anyway, after the incident, Claire went looking for Chris, stumbling across the T Veronica virus in the process, and Leon and Sherry were captured by the US government. Leon was interrogated by a government official by the name of Adam Benford. Sherry was taken away as a test subject as she had been infected with the G virus, but cured via a vaccine, and they wanted to study her. Leon was forced to work for the government both in exchange for his life, as he knew too many secrets, and to guarantee Sherry's safety. Leon received specialist training and ended up working for an anti-Umbrella agency, which is part of the United States Strategic Command, or US STRATCOM for short. And Leon would team up with a guy called Jack Krauser, a very experienced soldier, and Krauser was specifically brought in because of the danger of this next mission. although he knows nothing about the antivirus weapon protocol or its relation to the mission. Through the antivirus weapon protocol, Operation Javier was greenlit. Essentially, a drug trafficking warlord in South America named Javier Hidalgo had come into possession of the T-virus through a rogue Umbrella agent. This was another thing that was seriously damaging the Umbrella Corporation's case in court, as many of their researchers had been selling viruses and BOWs on the black market. Leon and Krauser were headed into the Amazon rainforest after BOWs and T-virus zombies were let into and attacked local villages, and this has caused T-virus outbreaks. Arriving in the rainforest, Leon looks at a photo of Javier Hidalgo and, distracted, Krauser ends up saving Leon from a snake attack. The intel they have is that Javier apparently had been buying T-virus samples from the rogue Umbrella agent since '91, and this was because his wife Hilda was very sick, suffering from a degenerative condition. Getting to a small village, Leon and Krauser immediately see a bunch of missing persons posters on the fence. This village had long been taken over by Hidalgo's cartel called the Sacred Snakes, and they run drugs through here. Leon and Krauser are in this village as they intend to question a man, the rogue Umbrella employee, about Hidalgo, the bioweapons he's purchased, and also to capture him. Whilst there, Krauser talks about how he doesn't believe BOWs even exist. It's not long until they encounter a man they have to put down, a zombie afflicted by the T-virus. More undead emerge as this village is crawling with not only zombies but BOWs. They encounter a number of zombified sacred snakes here too. In one of the huts they find the local man that was to be their guide, but he's wounded. With it clear this guy will die soon, they ask him what happened and he mentions a girl, saying that she brought devils to the village after escaping from Javier's mansion, and he was the one who had helped her escape. Krauser asks where the girl is now, but the guy dies. Realizing this girl is the best chance to find out where Javier's mansion is, they say there should be a boat by the church. Leaving, they see the guide's body get taken into the water by something, but they do not see what. The church is not far away, but once there and after fighting off a load more BOWs, they hear the sound of a woman singing. Entering the church, they see a girl singing to a BOW. The girl sees Leon, she stops singing, falls down, and the BOW starts to go mad, moving towards them. The look on Krauser's face is a picture. If he didn't believe BOWs exist before, he sure as hell does now. Engaging the beast in battle, they manage to inflict enough damage in order to drive it away, and they re-enter the church to speak with the young girl. She's unconscious, but Krauser is way more concerned about what he'd just seen. He asks Leon if he's fought these things before, and asks him to tell him everything. So, Leon tells him all about the Raccoon City incident, the T-virus, the G-virus, things that had traumatized him, and Leon recounts them and tells Krauser that this threat of bioweapons is a very real one. With Krauser up to speed, he and Leon jump into the boat there at the church, taking the young girl with them. She asks what happened to the people in the village, and Krauser tells her they are all dead, and Leon tells her why they are there, that they're looking for an American who had contacted Javier about a virus. Leon asks her to take them to a place called Amparo, and she agrees. They approach the large dam and the girl shows them how she escaped. The girl leads the pair through a water channel and reveals to them that her name is Manuela. Fighting off many more BOWs in the water channel, they spot Javier. In a twist of events, Manuela is revealed to be Javier's daughter. He says that everything he has done has been for her. He states that she only needs to follow his directions for 15 years, and by doing this, she will avoid the transformation. She begins to back away whilst Javier tells her that she needs to be patient. Javier talks about a man who gave them the Veronica virus. That's right, Alexia's T-Veronica virus has made its way here now, and Javier had administered it to his daughter. One of Javier's men grabs Manuela from behind and points a gun at Leon and Krauser. Javier tries to appeal to his daughter, telling her that he is the only one that can help her now. All of a sudden, a surge of water carries Leon and Krauser away, and Manuela jumps in after them, to the dismay of Javier. Leon later comes to, having been pulled from the water by Krauser. Needing to find Javier, they push on and end up back where they were when they got swept away, and Manuela has also caught up to them. Confronted by a new BOW, they are able to ascend to the top of the dam and have to fight a few more new BOWs, products of the T-Veronica virus. Defeating them, Leon asks Manuela why she ran away from her father, why he infected her with the virus. She responds that she shouldn't even be standing there, and she unwraps the bandages on her arm. It's revealed that the virus is already taking hold of her. It has changed her skin. She says that Javier injected her with the virus as part of her treatment. You see, Manuela has the same degenerative illness as her mother, Hilda. Her doctor told her there was no chance of recovery. Only people living in this particular area could contract this illness too. Manuela says that this illness killed her mother. Manuela, however, recovered from this illness upon receiving the T-Veronica virus. There's still the problem of the T-Veronica virus having that side effect of destroying the host's brain, and if they're not compatible with the virus, it'll completely take them over. But why hasn't Manuela turned? Arriving at Javier's mansion, they scope the place out, and Krauser says that they should take care of the girl before it gets too late. but it's only a matter of time before Manuela becomes a threat. Leon points to the fact that Javier knows something about how to prevent or halt this change, but they need to find out what that is. Leon shows Krauser the antivirus weapon protocol, and that Leon is here on special assignment from the president directly. Krauser had no idea. Leon's mission is to eradicate the virus. Krauser states that if Leon's orders are from the president, then he's on his side. Finding their way into the compound, Leon, Krauser, and Manuela make their way through, but find containers full of zombified, former members of the Sacred Snakes. It seems that Krauser, on the way round, is a little bit jealous that Leon has an assignment direct from the president, and thoughts are running wild in his mind. They also have to move through a disgusting and bloody tunnel. What on earth has Javier been doing down here? Moving into the mansion itself, Manuela sees the doctors that helped her escape, and it appears that they were shot by Javier. After Manuela had escaped, Javier had also released T-virus riddled zombies into the surrounding area, and this resulted in an outbreak. They all enter a large botanical garden, and a huge pod is sat in the middle of it. Manuela leads them to an area where she was never allowed to go. It's some type of surgery, and heading inside, Leon sees a load of organs inside jars. He also finds one of the young women who was on the missing persons posters back at the village. Manuela then collapses in pain. Javier shows up and offers an explanation that her organs are to be transplanted regularly, otherwise she will die. And that explains all the missing young women. So remember that Alexia froze herself for 15 years to stop the virus from destroying her, and so she could retain the power of the virus? Well, this is Javier's method. He'd do this whole transplant thing for the first 15 years. Javier says that he couldn't let Manuela die, and he starts banging on about how predators thrive. He says that because Leon and Krauser brought Manuela back to him, he'll grant their deaths meaning. The BOW from the church shows up and they must fight it again. Halfway through the fight, Manuela starts to sing to the BOW again, and it instantly becomes peaceful. Leon and Krauser take this opportunity to destroy it while it's distracted, and they do indeed finish it off. Afterwards, they see that Javier is gone, so they go after him. Leaving, however, the BOW is not dead, and it shoots barbs out of itself, piercing Krauser in the arm. They fill the creature with lead. Manuela approaches the dying creature, which looks at her with love and tears in its eyes. Manuela calls it Mother. Yeah, this is Javier's wife, Hilda. He had tried to save her by using the T-virus, but of course, this went horribly wrong, as she was not compatible with it, and Javier lost trust in Umbrella as a result. Going after Javier, it seems that in his madness, he went to the botanical garden and fused with the large plant there, becoming something known as the V-complex. He felt this was the best way to get his daughter back. Realizing they need to defeat this thing, Leon and Krauser start to shoot at it. But Krauser, who is at this point infected, remember, starts to see the power of this thing and wonders if that power could be harnessed or not. Manuela at one point tries to end her own life by choosing to die as a human, but is saved by Leon, and Krauser is perplexed as to why she'd want to die and deny herself such a gift. Manuela then reveals a power that the virus gives her. Similar to how Alexia turned her blood into fire, she is able to do the same, and together with Leon and Krauser, they are able to destroy the two joints of the V-complex. Leon shows concern though, telling Manuela she could die if she loses too much blood. At points during this fight, Javier regains his personality and asks Leon to kill him so he can save his daughter. Eventually they're able to bring the thing down. Getting lifted out by their evac chopper, Krauser stares at the burning remains of the T-complex, clearly still in awe of it, and he looks at his own infected arm, the virus starting to flow through his veins. Manuela says that she should have died with her father. Leon tells her that she's got an obligation to live on account of the organs of the young women that her father gave her. She agrees, and it seems Manuela was taken into custody by the US government to be placed under surveillance, but her body didn't seem to undergo any further changes. Krauser's arm didn't heal, and he was forced to leave the army, but no one really knows where he went. Truth is that Krauser faked his own death later that year in some kind of accident. But we now switch our focus over to another US Stratcom agent, Bruce McGivern. In September 2002, not long after Leon and Krauser's jaunt in South America, Bruce McGivern is given orders to infiltrate an Umbrella-owned and operated cruise liner called the Spencer Rain, a ship that was by all intents and purposes a cruise liner, but it allowed rich people to bid for black market bioweapons. The person of interest is a former Umbrella executive by the name of Morpheus Duval. Back in 1997, he used to command an island base in the Atlantic known as the Biosphere, which was located under a waste disposal facility. Duval didn't give a hoot about employee safety, and many died whilst under his leadership, after he let BOWs loose in the waterways so they could breed and mutate. Umbrella would eventually abandon the facility and Duval was stripped of his position in the company, and Umbrella tried to ruin Duval. It didn't work though, as Duval managed to bring together a load of ex-Umbrella employees, so Umbrella planted someone into this group of employees and this person would report back. According to their manifesto, this group of ex-employees decided that Africa was the symbol of power, and the biosphere was the symbol of worldly knowledge, and finally, Duval was the symbol of beauty. He was disappointed in Umbrella betraying him, but he planned to use them to secure some funding. As you heard, he was obsessed with beauty and dreamed of a place where only the beautiful people would live. This obsession only grew, and Duval would go under the knife and receive plastic surgery in order to make him look younger and more attractive. With his group of fanatics having taken over the biosphere, they constructed a missile silo and launched an assault on Umbrella's Paris laboratory, the same one where the Nemesis parasite was created, and they stole a bunch of T-virus samples along with something else that Umbrella were working on, which was the TNG virus. That's right, they'd mixed it together, and they'd managed to create, in theory at least, a tyrant with bioelectric capabilities. Only when Duval stole it, it had not yet been tested on human subjects. Anyway, in possession of the T-virus, Duval's group then put the T-virus into the warheads of a bunch of ballistic missiles and pointed them directly at both the United States and China. They then hijacked the Spencer Rain. Duval released BOWs in the ship's cargo hold and set the ship's course for the biosphere, and demanded $5 billion from both the US and China, which Duval imagined would be more than enough to build his utopia. And this is where Bruce McGivern comes in. Sent to infiltrate the Spencer Rain, McGivern is captured immediately by Morpheus Duval, who puts a gun to his head and knocks him down. Bruce asks Morpheus what he plans to do with the T-virus, but he refuses to tell him. About to execute him, a woman on an upper deck throws a grenade, and this stops Bruce's execution, and also severely injures Morpheus. Entering the ship and making his way through it, fighting through the undead in here, he makes contact with his government, who tell him they have until midnight tomorrow, or Duval will launch the missiles. Bruce needs to retrieve the virus. Bruce meets the woman who saved his life, and she attacks him, breaking his radio. Her name is Fong Ling, and she's an agent working for the Chinese government. Bruce tells her they work for opposing governments, but they're in the same business and should work together. To Bruce's surprise, she knows his name, but she then leaves. Working his way through the ship, Bruce finds a locked hatch which needs a valve handle to open. He finds it, but at some point he is attacked by something which launches itself through a window. He encounters Fong Ling again, and she takes the valve handle, making her way to the pool deck and opening the hatch, with Bruce having caught up to her now. Morpheus, meanwhile, really struggling with his bad injuries from the blast on the foredeck, he sends 2 Hunter BOWs after them. Bruce defeats them both, much to the despair of Morpheus, who is so determined to stay alive that he injects himself with the TNG virus. Jumping into the hatch that Fong Ling opened, Bruce now finds himself on the lower decks, and comes across a presentation room where people buying BOWs and viruses could see them showcased. He finds a document which mentions the tyrant they tried to produce using the TNG virus, but that it had a fatal flaw in terms of an exposed organ on its back. Grabbing a crowbar on the ground here and going to leave, Bruce then sees another, what appears to be a female tyrant walking towards him. He speaks to him, calling him a scared little rat with an ugly, useless gun. Words that Morpheus had said to him not even an hour earlier. Yeah, this is Morpheus, mutated as a result of the virus, and seizing his chance to get out of there, Bruce uses the crowbar to pry open a crate on the cargo hold and finds a keycard which he needs in order to escape Morpheus. With Morpheus still in pursuit, Bruce sees Fong Ling, and he holds the door shut while she gets into the control room next door in order to get the other door open. Letting Bruce in, they are able to lock Morpheus out until the beast gets bored and goes away. With the coast now clear, Bruce goes back into the presentation room, and thanks to Fong Ling unlocking all the security doors on the ship, he's able to ascend to the upper decks again. He finds the captain undead from the T-virus and also finds his way to the ship's bridge. Fong Ling is there and an alarm is going off, and it's because the ship is on a collision course with the island where the biosphere is located. Bruce tries to do something about it, but there's no use. Taking out the zombies there, Bruce heads out onto the helipad, but Fong Ling is there and being confronted by the failed TNG tyrant. It smacks her out of the way and Bruce takes the thing down, targeting its weakness by way of the organ on its back. Unfortunately, this ship is destined to collide with the island, so they jump into the water. Bruce gets to shore and spots the waste disposal facility heading to it. He spots a hole in the ground and electricity surrounding it, which can only mean that Morpheus has been here, so Bruce follows him. He finds BOW reports which detail a particular BOW down here by the name of Torpedo Kids, named so because of the movement they make in the water. Their bodies contain acid, so the staff were advised against touching them. They have a mother who spawns these kids. By killing the mother, they'd eradicate the Torpedo Kids. Sure enough, entering the waterways, Bruce comes across these Torpedo Kids along with the undead workers that were abandoned here. Using an old radio to contact HQ, Bruce learns that China have agreed to pay the $5 billion. Since the US have a policy of not negotiating with terrorists, the safety of the US is in Bruce's hands. Meanwhile, Fong Ling has found a way into the facility and encounters a very large BOW. Thankfully, it's completely blind. Exploring the waterways in the facility, it's revealed that this fat blind BOW is called Pluto. This used to be a person who was a condemned criminal who had no idea what was going to happen to him. They performed a lobotomy on the guy, which they claim was for humane reasons, as this way he wouldn't feel pain, and then they removed his eyes. They introduced a muscle booster, and Pluto gained a lot of weight. The loss of his eyes had resulted in an enhanced sense of hearing. Anyway, Fong Ling finds her way out to a large helipad, but she's quickly targeted by a bunch of lasers that all merge together. Bruce saves the day though and gets her out of the way before she's evaporated by the targeting satellite in space. He notices the tattoo on her arm and uses a knife to cut a targeting chip from under it. The symbol on her arm matches the one on the satellite, meaning her government just tried to kill her. Since they're paying the $5 billion to Morpheus and his group, she's expendable. Nonetheless, Fong Ling says that she'll continue with her mission as the people of China are still in danger. Bruce carries on with his mission and heads into the freight passages. He eventually comes to an elevator and gets confronted by Pluto. Remembering that he's blind, Bruce either needs to be quiet about it or just blast away at the beast. Eventually, Pluto is defeated. Getting onto the elevator, he's joined by Fong Ling, and they descend deeper into the facility, but Morpheus decides to drop in, causing the elevator to plunge. Bruce pulls the emergency brake and helps Fong Ling out of the elevator, but she isn't able to pull him out in time and the elevator plunges down even further. Fong Ling manages to find a terminal in order to restore the main power. Using another elevator, she comes out into a large open room with a desk. She spots the ballistic missiles on a bunch of monitors, but she's snuck up on by Morpheus, who knocks her out. Bruce in the meantime survived and has regained consciousness, emerging from the elevator. But it's not long until he encounters another of Umbrella's messed up BOWs. This one is called the Halberd and is a cross between a giant wasp and a giant cockroach. It sends its loyal soldiers after Bruce, but he's able to defeat the thing. After, he enters a lab and finds a weapon called a particle rifle, also known as the T-Buster. Its documentation states that it's specifically designed to destroy any biohazard caused by the T-virus. They hadn't tested it, but staff were confident that it would work on beings charged with the TNG virus, so maybe this thing can be used to defeat Morpheus. Using the same elevator that Fong Ling did, he comes out in the large room with the monitors. He moves the chair here and pushes a button underneath it, and this reveals a doorway behind the desk. However, an alarm sounds and Bruce sees Morpheus, and an unconscious Fong Ling on the monitors, clearly bait for Bruce. As you'd have guessed, a missile launch sequence has been activated, so Bruce has to move fast. He confronts and fights Morpheus using the particle rifle, and manages to bring the mutant down. Helping Fong Ling up, she admonishes him for not disarming the missiles first. They realise that they'll never make it to the missile silo in time. Not one to accept defeat, Fong Ling says to Bruce she'll navigate him whilst watching on the monitors, and she does this, directing him to the silo. On the way, however, it seems that Morpheus has evolved, and is now just a big old mountain of biomass. Shooting Morpheus' head, which emerges from time to time, Bruce fires a kill shot and brings Morpheus down for good. The beast swells to such a size that the missiles launch and hit him instead, and in the aftermath of this ordeal, Bruce and Fong Ling emerge on an escape capsule. He says that she should come with him back to the States, and they kiss just as a US Stratcom chopper arrives to extract them. Crisis averted. So after the Mansion and Raccoon City incidents, and with the trial still going on, Umbrella would be dealt another swift blow. Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine had founded an anti-BOW agency dedicated to investigations into Umbrella and the removal of bioweapons. In 2003, Chris and Jill had obtained reports of mutant wolves attacking people in the Caucasus. And sure enough, visiting a small village, they were attacked by zombies, victims of another T-virus outbreak. They find a young girl named Anna hiding in a house, and she says that a wolf attacked the village, turning everyone into zombies, and that most of the villagers are missing. Tracking the survivors to a grain silo, they find them all dead and now zombified. There are too many to take on, and their exit door is jammed shut, so Jill and Anna hide in a fridge while Chris bravely takes a stand. He manages to defeat them all by using bags of flour to burn them, but on managing to get to safety, a man approaches, and it's Albert Wesker. Chris accuses Wesker of being responsible, but Wesker denies that this is the case. Instead, he says that the village is cursed. Unfortunately, the building's instability means the floor collapses, and Chris, Jill, and Anna are in danger of being attacked by hunters. Wesker buggers off, so retrieving a grenade launcher from the transport, they take the hunters down. They catch up with Wesker again, and he tells them that Umbrella set up storehouses for both BOWs and the T-virus in this region. He explains that villagers here willingly participated in the tests and experiments, and that the house they are stood in is the house of an Umbrella employee. Wesker says he's here because he hopes to find out the location of another hidden Umbrella laboratory somewhere in the region. Despite an explosion, Wesker is able to obtain the data he needs, and he runs off. Chris and Jill discover that Anna's father, who was the Umbrella employee, worked at a local plant, and they deduce that this must be the hidden laboratory that Wesker was looking for. Flying to the chemical plant with 2 attack choppers, they immediately spot a bunch of hunter BOWs and turn them into chunky soup. Landing and infiltrating the plant, they find it teeming with zombies and BOWs, but they fight their way through. Having worked through the laboratory, they enter a large open area, and who is there? It's Colonel Sergei Vladimir. We last saw him in part 1 where he confronted Wesker after what happened at the training school. He also used an AI called the Red Queen AI to revoke Wesker's security clearance, since as you'll remember, Wesker wanted to steal embryos and Umbrella data to give to his new employers, but failed. Anyway, he speaks about a new and experimental bioweapon that Umbrella called Talos. It stands for Tyrant Armored Lethal Organic System. Its armor is controlled by the Red Queen AI, and that armor is attached to a T-011 Tyrant. This Talos project was already in its prototype stage when the Queen Leech attacked the Arkley laboratory back in 1998, and it was moved to Umbrella's Russian branch, which was of course based in this chemical plant on the request of Oswald E. Spencer himself, who wrote a letter to Sergei. During Ada's escape from Raccoon City with the G-virus in her possession, the container she grappled onto was being airlifted out of the city by Sergei, and in this container was the Red Queen AI itself. Sergei had done his best to try and keep Umbrella going through black market dealings, so he is basically Umbrella's last hope. But let's get back to the present day. During Chris and Jill's journey through the plant, Wesker has now infiltrated the facility himself and defeated Sergei's 2 Ivan Tyrant bodyguards whilst doing so. When Chris and Jill are busy fighting the Talos BOW, Wesker confronts Sergei in his control room and is impressed that Wesker defeated the Ivans. He says that it's a shame that their friendship has to end, and then he mutates due to having injected himself with a modified T-virus strain. Wesker destroys and fights mutant Sergei and defeats him, whilst Chris and Jill manage to defeat Talos. Wesker then steals all the Umbrella data off of the Red Queen AI onto a disk and wipes the memory of the Red Queen. His plan is to leak this information, which is Umbrella's activities, along with their collusion with the United States, to the prosecutor involved in the Raccoon Trials. This became the subject of many people's conversation, since the data provided by Wesker would never see the light of day, as it would apparently do irreparable damage to US interests. Umbrella would declare bankruptcy not long after, and Oswald E. Spencer would now become a wanted man, so he went into hiding with no one knowing where he was. But now let's do a little bit of world building. Also in 2003, Albert Wesker had entered into a business partnership with an American-Italian woman named Excella Gioni. Excella is a geneticist who is employed by a company we've mentioned before, and they were members of the FPC called TRICELL. They're a company who have 3 separate sectors: pharmaceutical, shipping, and natural resources, extracting fossil fuels, that sort of thing. These 3 sectors merged and became the company TRICELL. Well, it turns out that TRICELL had their own, very secret, bioweapons development program. Wesker provided Excella with data from the files he stole from Umbrella's Red Queen and gave her information on the T-virus, which launched her career into the stratosphere. Not only that, but TRICELL's bioweapons development program excelled, and Excella became the CEO of TRICELL Africa. Wesker and Excella would hold business meetings which would grab the attention of a company that called themselves the Organization. But the Organization, despite their suspicions that Wesker was plotting something with TRICELL and knowing his propensity to betray people, they put Wesker in charge of receiving a potential and powerful new bioweapon. After the fall of Umbrella and their bioweapons inevitably ending up in the hands of terrorists, the world leaders were scared another incident like Raccoon City would occur. So the Global Pharmaceutical Consortium, another name for the aforementioned FPC, acted, and the BSAA, an anti-terrorism unit, was birthed in order to bring stability to regions across the world, with Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine being 2 of their original members. The BSAA was also heavily funded by TRICELL, a company that, as we just discussed, have a lot of shady stuff going on with their organization. The BSAA didn't have many powers and were pretty much restricted to getting permission from the country they wished to work in, and it was pretty much considered to be an NGO. Thankfully, they had a good leader in Clive O'Brien, and the amount of agents they had grew. Sometime in 2004, the floating Aquapolis known as Terragrigia would come under attack by a group of bioterrorists calling themselves Il Veltro. They were an Italian ultra-nationalist group, and they heavily opposed the construction of the Aquapolis, Terragrigia, on the grounds that it represented the moral corruption of modern-day society. Terragrigia was a modern marvel though, with it being the only city in the world to rely solely on solar energy for its power. Il Veltro released hunter BOWs on the ground and dispersed UAV drones to spread a new virus called the T-Abyss virus, which is an altered version of Umbrella's T-virus. When it came to bioterrorist attacks, the city of Terragrigia was actually under the jurisdiction of the United States, and they had their own official bioterrorism organization called the Federal Bioterrorism Commission, or the FBC for short. The FBC is the enforcing agency of the guidelines set forth by the National Species Protection Act, and the chair of the FBC is chosen by the Wildlife Protection Committee, and has the final say on all matters regarding national biological safety. When it came to Terragrigia though, the BSAA were brought in only under an advisory role, and all they could do was witness the FBC in their attempted defense of the city fall flat. FBC agents like Parker Luciani, Jessica Sherowat, and Raymond Vesta did their level best to fight against the threat, but it was all in vain. They managed to make it out via a chopper and escape the city, but the truth is that FBC agents and the city were abandoned by the US as the decision was made to completely destroy Terragrigia using its own solar energy matrix. FBC Director Morgan Lansdale would then hold a press conference stating that Ilveltro as a group had now been disbanded and dealt with. The ruins of Terragrigia would then be fenced off, with it being a stark reminder of the threat of bioterrorism. After this, Parker and Jessica would both join the BSAA, but something is about to go down in Spain. In 2004, Leon Kennedy is in rural Spain. Continuing to be haunted by the trauma and horror of what he went through in Raccoon City 6 years ago, Leon is still working as a US Stratcom agent. He's holding a photo of a young blonde woman, and one of the two Spanish police officers asks Leon what he's doing there. He replies that he's looking for someone. The police officer tells him that a lot of people go missing around there, and it's been that way for a very long time. Some hikers had recently gone missing in particular. The police pull over to the side of the road as one of them needs to take a leak. The guy hears something in the forest and heads off to check it out, but he doesn't return, so Leon goes to see if the guy's okay. Leon comes across a dead and decaying animal that looks like it's been sacrificed on a makeshift altar. He also comes across a hunter's lodge, and entering, he searches the place, finding a set of sticks tied together into a charm to form some kind of symbol. He soon encounters the man who resides at this lodge, and despite Leon attempting to engage him in conversation using basic Spanish, the man isn't interested in conversation, he's just mumbling to himself. Leon spots the bloodied badge of the officer that went off to investigate, and behind him, the man has now got an axe and attempts to kill Leon, who puts his training to good use by putting the old guy on his ass. His neck appears to have been broken, and Leon hears a scream coming from somewhere. The man dropped a key, so Leon uses that to descend into the basement. He finds a load of dead animals down there rotting away. He hears the policeman's radio, and investigating he finds him there dead. And the other police officer sat back in the jeep is calling for help but lets out a scream. Leon is horrified to see the man whose neck was broken coming down the stairs, so he shoots him in order to put him down for good. More crazed villagers start coming into the lodge, so Leon deals with them too. Finding another way out of the lodge, he sees the map of the village, Valdalobos, and a photo of the girl he's looking for tied up and being held. He makes contact with his handler, Ingrid Hunnigan, and relays the situation back to her. Leon refers to Baby Eagle. This is the code name of a person he's trying to locate, who it so happens is the president's daughter, Ashley Graham. Leon tells Hunnigan it's likely she is somewhere in this village, and he sees a location by the lake and thinks that she may have been taken there. Their call is cut short when more crazed locals burst into the room and Leon escapes through a window. Heading down the short path with the aim of getting to the lake and fighting more crazy people, he comes across the village and scoping it out, he sees the villagers burning the other police officer alive. Trying to sneak his way through the village, Leon is eventually rumbled and has to defend himself against the angry villagers, including one hooded villager who is screaming and wielding a chainsaw. Locking himself inside a house, they eventually breach it, but Leon survives the encounter as a church bell begins to toll, mesmerizing the villagers, and they simply leave, shutting the door which features an insignia on it behind them. Hunnigan makes contact and tells Leon to look for a large windmill, as there's a path to the lake on the far side of it. After searching the houses for more supplies, Leon heads off and spots the windmill. He's at a farm and, yep, more crazed villagers to deal with here. Heading down the path past the windmill, he's attacked by villagers again, but entering a house and disarming traps, Leon hears a banging sound coming from one of the rooms and finds a villager banging on a hatch in the floor. Killing him, he opens the hatch for himself and finds a wriggling sack under the house, and on opening it there's a man inside. The look on his face turns to surprise as a very large bearded man approaches them. He easily disarms Leon and launches him, knocking him out. He then injects him with some kind of egg. Drifting in and out of consciousness, a strange man looks at Leon, telling him that he's their sacrificial lamb, that he'll receive their most sacred body, and that it begins now. He then comes to, and he's been tied up next to the man he'd found under the house. The man was tied up as he was captured whilst on the way to the church to meet someone. He introduces himself as Luis Serra. He rightly guesses that Leon is looking for someone, and he mentions a certain señorita. Leon demands to know what he knows, and he says that he's heard they are moving Ashley, and he saw them dragging someone to the church. Leon saves Luis from being killed by another villager, and using the chain, Leon breaks the guy's neck, and Luis retrieves the key, unlocking his cuffs, throwing the key for Leon, and he leaves. Asking Hunnigan to do a background check on Luis, Leon retrieves his gear and heads outside, where he meets a strange man who is a merchant. He can upgrade weapons for Leon, and he's interested in buying treasures that Leon may find in and around the village. Selling any that he's picked up, Leon moves onwards in order to try and find the church. He comes across a large stronghold, and of course, it's full of those crazy villagers. He then comes across a large and very old manor house, and searching it, it seems that this is the house of the big bearded guy that knocked Leon out. From documents in here, it appears that he was once a relatively normal and nice person, and was the village chief named Torres Mendez. The village itself was a very traditional village, and a lot of the villagers were themselves devout Catholics. Mendez was heavily involved in the village, and he kept records of what happened there. This tight-knit community would celebrate little successes in making their lives a little bit easier. You see, this was a village that shunned modern technology for a more traditional lifestyle. A couple of successes under Chief Mendez saw them finding a way to catch more fish, as well as opening up ironworks which allowed for the creation and manufacture of the agricultural tools needed for farming. They built a fish farm, and all was going well in the village under the leadership of Mendez, who was teaching the children of the village literacy and mathematics, and then by the evening, he was dining with families in order to hear their grievances. The secluded and very private village was open up to the outside, and the village was by all accounts prospering, which is quite unbelievable considering what Leon has encountered in this village so far. But what happened to these people? Well, that'll all become clearer very soon. Leon heads upstairs and finds a portrait of the guy he saw when he was out of it. It seems that the villagers could even be worshipping this guy. Finding a key with an insignia on it, which will unlock that door back in the village, Leon goes to leave but is confronted by Chief Mendez. Leon fires his weapon at him, but this does nothing, and the big guy picks him up by the throat. However, looking at him, he says that Leon's blood has accepted the gift after looking into his eyes. Mendez is then shot by someone wearing red outside the window, and this person then quickly disappears. Mendez walks off, and Leon is slightly confused about what he said about his blood. Hunnigan makes contact and gives Leon some information about Luis Serra, and that he used to be one of Umbrella's researchers. Sending in the details, Leon reads that after his graduation, Luis was employed by Umbrella's research division, becoming one of their rising stars. He developed several over-the-counter drugs, but all of them were discontinued before they were made available to the public. He resigned a few years after this. Authorities tried to track down anyone with links to Umbrella, but they were unable to locate Luis. Hunnigan's note at the bottom of the file states that Luis being assigned to simple and common drugs by Umbrella doesn't make sense, as he was said to be one of their top researchers. Anyway, Leon needs to track down Ashley, so he leaves the manor. He also finds a wolf that has been caught in a bear trap, and he can choose to help it or not. Heading back over to the village, Leon sees a tower there collapse, and using the insignia key on the door, Leon is now in the town hall, which again features the portrait of the man he saw. There are passages from a book, almost like some sort of Bible, and it's open at a chapter called Iluminados, which is Spanish for enlightened. It speaks of flourishing and outgrowing their pen. What the hell does that mean? He also discovers a huge skull on an altar, piles of skulls in the corner of the room, and some weird symbols drawn on the walls which seem to resemble a flower. This couldn't be the flower from Africa, could it? A little further up the path, Leon comes to the old church. Taking out any villagers in and around the graveyard, Leon needs to find a way inside. In a side room, he finds a picture of Ashley and it has writing on it to keep her locked in the church until the appointed time. He finds another map too, which states that the key to the church is to be kept in a cave on the other side of the lake. It also makes mention of their lord and also a monster. So Leon makes his way across the precarious platforms, dealing with more angry villagers. Coming to a large open clearing, Leon hears a growling coming from behind a barred gate. With nothing to do but move on though, he finally arrives at the lake. Looking across the lake, he spots two villagers getting rid of the body of the police officer. They then make a hasty exit, and it's soon clear why. The villagers are feeding the aforementioned monster in the lake, which happily gulps up the officer's body. Having found some fuel, Leon jumps into a boat and the bleeding thing craps out on him in the middle of the lake. As you can imagine, sitting in a broken down boat in the middle of a lake inhabited by a large creature is not ideal, as Leon soon discovers. Using harpoons to hurt the creature, he's able to kill the thing, but something happens to Leon and he starts to cough up blood and he passes out. He has a nightmare about the man he'd saw, the man whose portraits are everywhere in this village, and the man is saying that he will join him in his holy blessing forever. Leon is jolted awake and is relieved to see that he's okay. Starting up the boat again, he emerges on a dock, and Hunnigan calls saying that he's been out for 3 hours. He emerges out into an area with a few houses, and on a path he sees a shadow which is disturbing. Something erupts from one of the villagers' heads. It has tendrils, but whatever it is can be killed or destroyed by using a flash grenade or inflicting enough damage. Finding more bloodied altars, Leon finds another strange symbol. The key is there, but he needs 2 items in order to release it. Using another boat, Leon explores and finds these 2 items. He also discovers what remains of the female hikers that had been reported missing, as they'd been sacrificed too. Using the items, Leon has finally got the key for the church. Heading back over to the church and once in the large open area, Leon spots some sort of cultist chanting about something called Las Plagas, Spanish for the plagues. This seems to awaken whatever was growling behind that gate earlier on, and it smashes through. This is a huge troll called El Gigante. After inflicting enough damage to the giant, a parasite emerges and Leon inflicts some damage to that as well. If he freed the wolf earlier on, it shows up to lend a hand to Leon by distracting El Gigante. Despite the beast's size, Leon is able to bring it down, and a journal inside its pen spoke of the town hall not being able to contain El Gigante, and this thing had been reared by the villagers, which means that these people are producing their own bioweapons. The journal also states that the beast was consuming so much food that the villagers themselves were running out. It mentions a castle and that someone from there had helped put El Gigante to sleep with an incantation, which explains the cultist that appeared and woke it up. Making it back to the church, Leon heads inside using the key. He finds Ashley, and at first he tries to attack him, assuming him to be one of her captors. He says that he's there on the president, her father's orders, but she runs off. She looks out the window and they see a large group of villagers walking towards the church. They both hear a very loud voice in their heads, and it's that man again, speaking through what could even be a collective consciousness to the villagers, telling them to pursue both Leon and Ashley and to deliver them to salvation. Leon asks Ashley to trust him and he'll get her home safe. The villagers enter the church, and Leon and Ashley work together in order to escape. Jumping out of a window, they leave the church, and Hunnigan sends Leon coordinates for an evac chopper pickup. Fighting a bunch of villagers, the pair make their way to the coordinates. With the weather getting worse by the minute, they need to hurry. Crossing over the bridge near to the farm, they spot Luis, offering them refuge in a house. Inside, and now knowing about Luis's past working with Umbrella, Leon demands to know why he is there. There are more pressing matters though, such as the villagers who want to kill them. So they team up in order to defend the house and Ashley from them. With a stream of villagers seemingly never ending, Ashley opens the door and tells them to hurry, and they use an alternate entrance to move past the gate, shutting the path off from their pursuers. Ashley starts to cough up blood, worried about what's happening to her, and Luis asks her if this is the first time she's coughed up blood, and she says it is. Luis says it's something called plaga, and the same thing inside the villagers is also inside Ashley and of course Leon. He says at this early stage it's possible to remove the parasite, the plaga, with a surgical procedure. He reveals a scar showing that his plaga was removed via this method. He says that he has a plan, but they're going to have to trust him. He walks off and tells them he'll contact them later. A little ways up the path, Luis spots a woman there, a woman wearing a red dress. It's Ada. She asks Luis where something called the Amber is, which he says is not on him at the moment. A deal had apparently been made between Luis and Ada, and whoever she's working for, to get Luis out of there as soon as he delivers them the Amber. Him not having the Amber means no protection. Back with Leon, Hunnigan calls with bad news. The weather is too bad, so the chopper has been unable to make its approach. Leon tells Hunnigan they'll find a way to escape. Heading through another stronghold and fighting a set of twins, each with chainsaws, Ashley is grabbed by Chief Mendez. Again, trying to injure him has little to no effect, and fleeing, they manage to escape Mendez and more murderous villagers and come to a small slaughterhouse. Entering the slaughterhouse, Leon is yeeted off a walkway by Mendez. He says that Leon needs to abandon his body, but Leon isn't having it, and he uses oil from a barrel, shooting the barrel, and the explosion does some real damage to Mendez. Unfortunately, this does not kill him, but instead forces him to evolve. During the ensuing fight, Mendez gets separated from his bottom half, but this does not stop him and the fight continues, but eventually Leon is able to kill the chief. His glass eye falls out, so Leon grabs that. The merchant will probably be into that sort of stuff. Keeping moving, Leon and Ashley head up another path hoping to escape, and they come to a bridge leading to a castle. Crossing over into the castle, the drawbridge is closed behind them, so they're stuck there, for now at least. Luis makes contact with Leon and tells him that he's got some medicine that will help suppress the growth of the plaga parasite inside Ashley and Leon. He tells them both to meet him in the castle's courtyard. Scoping out the castle, he sees the same cultist as the one that released El Gigante from his slumber. They also scope out catapults, which means that they'll need to be careful when moving around the ramparts. Moving up and encountering new and different types of plaga, Leon is able to use a large cannon to blow the doors open, and he and Ashley enter the castle's main area. Inside the main hall, Leon meets the 7th Castellan of this fine castle, and he introduces himself as Ramon Salazar. He doesn't ask for much, only that Leon hand Ashley over so that someone he calls Lord Sadler can spread the Las Plagas parasite all over the world. Leon and Ashley basically tell him to go to hell, so he leaves with his massive bodyguards, and Leon is forced to fight an army of his zealots. Once they're dealt with, Leon and Ashley find a path leading down to the dungeon. This place is basically a torture chamber. A caretaker's note doesn't fill them with delight either, as it speaks about the caretaker hearing the sounds of nails clawing at the walls, and he speaks of a man harbouring enough hate to ruin the world. Hearing groaning and roaring coming from somewhere down there, Leon falls through the floor and comes face to face with someone who is blind, has a mask on, who has been heavily restrained. This is the Garrador. Leon whispers that he can't see him, and this causes him to thrash violently. A bunch of chains by the exit makes noise inevitable, and the Garrador tears free of his bindings, going to where the source of the noise was. Leon now has to fight this blind but very aggressive man. Looking at more information from the caretaker's note, this guy used to be the Salazar family's torturer. It was a generational thing, as his father and grandfather served in the same capacity. It seems this man really enjoyed his work. The caretaker was assigned to feed him and dispose of the mess, but it was the sounds he would make that forced the caretaker to quit. Leon sees a parasite partially exposed on his back, which pops out just like with El Gigante, and he damages the parasite, killing the Garrador. Reuniting with Ashley, they make their way through the castle, having to put up with more zealot nonsense, but they are eventually able to get to the courtyard.
You okay?
I think so. Instead of worrying about her, worry about your own skin. Foolish little lamb. Temperance, child.
Ashley. Wait!
Contacting Hunnigan, Leon updates her that he got separated from Ashley. However, the reception is rubbish, and Hunnigan cannot hear what he's saying. He continues on to find a way to reconnect with Ashley and travels through a location where some dead zealots are knelt in prayer. They seem to be worshipping the Plaga. He hears chanting, and cultists next door are indeed chanting to the Plaga, calling it forth to erupt. During battles, he must seek out and take out the shaman causing it. But since Leon is infected, he can feel the parasite in himself affected by these chants. Entering a library, Leon comes face to face with someone he hasn't seen for a very long time. It's Ada. After a quick melee, Leon asks who she's working for this time, but in classic fashion, she tells him nothing. She tells him to leave Ashley, but she's lost no matter what. If he walks away, then maybe he'll live to meet Ada again. Just like that, she's gone. Truth is, she's been helping Leon throughout his time here, and she was the one who rang the church bell, stopping him from having to fight the villagers, and she also shot Mendez when he was squeezing the life out of Leon. Ada is actually infected too. When meeting Luis and freeing him when imprisoned in the castle, Ada had to fight one of Ramon Salazar's bodyguards, but during the fight, this is when she got infected. This has resulted in her having pretty vivid hallucinations. At some point, Ada had collapsed and was seemingly saved by Wesker, who treated her in Mendez's manor house, and told her that she needed to be an asset and not a liability. Luis realised she was infected whilst in the castle with her after he saw her eye, and he handed her a bunch of ingredients to track down in the castle so he could make her some medicine to suppress the parasite. She also found a document in the castle which mentioned that the parasite inside her could be gotten rid of if she kills the creature that infected her, so she needs to kill Ramon's bodyguard. Not long after his encounter with Ada, Leon spots another type of plaga. This one digs into the body of the host and controls it, using it to launch a frenzied attack. On top of the castle, Leon has to fight another El Gigante, one that is now covered in heavy armor. He's having a wonderful time throwing boulders at Leon, but upon heading round and flanking the brute, Leon mounts another cannon and brings this one down too. But he's not done yet. Oh no. Springing a surprise attack on Leon, El Gigante fails to grab him and falls down into a chasm. Now he's done. Leon finds Ashley crying and upset in a room, and she tells him that she's worried she might hurt him again. She says she's scared, but she looks at Leon and realizes that he is infected too. He tells her it's okay to be afraid, but she can't run, and she's always got to keep moving forward. And he reassures her that they can beat this together. Asking Luis where he is, he apologizes and says that he's screwed up. He asks Leon to meet him in the ballroom past the courtyard. Making their way through the zealot and plaga dog-infested gardens, Leon and Ashley find their way into an extremely lavish part of the castle. Having to track down pieces of a statue, which is a challenge, they do so, but upon them completing it, Leon and Ashley are separated again. Leon tells Ashley to run, and she does so, with some zealots chasing her, but she manages to lose them. Needing to free Leon from his temporary holding cell, Ashley moves through a series of dark hallways, avoiding attacks by zealots and plaga-infested suits of armor, using a special lamp in order to repel them. Finding a hidden mausoleum, she obtains an item she needs in order to get to Leon, but she is pursued by many suits of armor. Returning to Leon by using the crest, she moves the dead zealot and he drops a key which she throws to Leon. Unfortunately, as he's unlocking the cell, Ashley is grabbed by one of Salazar's bodyguards, a creature called Verdugo, and she is carried away. Meanwhile, Ada is still doing her thing, trying to get a hold of this amber she was talking to Luis about. Her employer, Wesker, calls about the amber, and she refers to Leon as her little helper. Wesker says that Leon can continue to help her, for now. She then sees Ashley being carried off by Verdugo and calls Leon, updating him on Ashley's location. She says that something big is about to go down in the throne room. So with that tip, Leon heads there next. Ada, meanwhile, meets up with Luis, who tries to hand her the amber, but the parasite inside her is reacting to it. So Luis needs to hold on to it for now. But he takes the ingredients that she got a hold of and is able to produce a suppressant for her. This suppressant kicks in just in time as Ramon's bodyguard shows up, and this means that this creature, for now at least, cannot track Ada. Nearing the throne room, Leon comes into contact with creatures called novistadors, and these grim flying freaks are the product of someone placing plaga secretion, which is a black liquid, into the womb of a human virgin. Novistador translates as the unseen, which is apt, as sometimes they will use camouflage to sneak upon their prey. Escaping the novistadors, it gets even more difficult now, as he has to fight two men that are just like the Garrador. Nonetheless, he manages to defeat them both, and beyond this room is the throne room, and upon entering, Leon sees the zealots have been getting Ashley ready for some sort of ritual. She warns him as he rushes into the room, and this is because Verdugo drops down on him. Ramon Salazar is there, and a zealot walks over to Ashley with a goblet of the black liquid that I mentioned before. Leon is pinned down and can only watch whilst Ashley is forced to drink the foul stuff, which Salazar says will make her suffer. This inevitably causes her great pain. Verdugo then throws Leon down a hole on the floor, but he's able to break his fall by grabbing a chain. Moving on through the tunnels down here, fighting more novistadors, Leon comes out in some sort of laboratory. This laboratory belonged to and was used by a man called Isidro Talavera. Needing to get an elevator working, Leon goes off to find the power supply, but he's being stalked. Approaching the power for the elevator, Leon is attacked by something and does his best to avoid it. Restoring power, Leon's stalker reveals itself, and it's Verdugo. So a little bit about Verdugo. Verdugo was once human and was Ramon Salazar's butler by the name of Isidro Talavera. Isidro was incredibly smart, with a scientific brain, and Lord Sadler would give Isidro a dominant species plaga. Isidro's task now was to improve upon the flaws of the human form, and took inspiration from arthropods. It was Isidro who created the novistadors after he transfused the black liquid into the virgin womb. He named the sacred lava as U2 and was delighted that he'd created a new species, as was Lord Sadler. He would later write about how the housekeeper had volunteered herself for experiments and she would become U3, as he believed 3 to be the most beautiful and complete number. He would name her Passanta, and she would serve at the right hand of Ramon Salazar, wearing the black cloak. This is the one that's stalking Ada, and Isidore writes that it's his turn to show loyalty. A little later, he'd let the black liquid into his own body, and thus he became Verdugo. He called it the holy labour of rebirth. He would become a true servant of God and would become the executioner of the heretics. Anyway, Leon can use the liquid nitrogen showers there to freeze Verdugo and do some major damage to him. Having to wait for the elevator to arrive, Leon keeps Verdugo entertained whilst he waits for it. Escaping on the elevator or simply killing Verdugo, Leon suffers an attack, and he hears the voice of Lord Sadler, who is giving someone orders. He tells this person that his suffering can end, just as it has for Ashley, who he claims has joined them in communion and is now of their flesh and blood. He orders the man to deliver the vagrant children to their salvation, and Leon sees the reflection of the person in their knife. The elevator stops and Luis is there waiting for Leon with the drugs that he and Ashley need, the plaga suppressant. Meanwhile, Ada has her own thing to deal with as she is being stalked, as Passanta is after her and the two fight. She ends up killing it, but after this fight, the parasite inside her ejects itself from her body because of course Passanta is dead, with Ada crushing it under her foot. But back to Leon. With the suppressant seeming to have worked on Leon, he grabs the other one meant for Ashley and he and Luis leave. Moving on through the mines underneath the castle, they then discover there are quite a few villagers down here. Fighting through them, Luis and Leon manage to obtain some dynamite and use it to blast their way through various blockages. Finding a way into the blast furnace, Leon is grabbed by El Gigante. Thing is, there's another one. Yep, 2 El Gigantes. Using the environment to their advantage, they manage to dunk one into the molten lava. But now for the other one. At some point in the fight against the remaining El Gigante, Luis buggers off. He does return and he's brought some more dynamite with him. Jumping onto the back of El Gigante, he places the dynamite on its back, and kaboom. The parasite is exposed, and Leon and Luis finish him off. El Gigante will not be bothering us again. Maybe. But probably not. Maybe. Luis explains that these mines were where Las Plagas were discovered, so this place is sacred or holy ground to these people, a cult calling themselves Los Iluminados. The Plagas were being preserved inside ancient deposits of, get this, amber. It's what Ada's employer wants her to obtain. With no other way to get through the mines other than by using the mine car, Leon and Luis jump in and ride it. With the villagers down there trying to stop them, they eventually ride the car through the excavation site where they dug up the amber deposits with the Plaga inside, which is now a Navistador nest. Battling numerous Navistadors, they reach another elevator and ride it upwards, with Leon and Luis speaking about his past involvement with Los Illuminados, as he used to work for them. So Leon suggests that he continue to help in order to make up for it. Getting off the elevator, Luis winces in pain, stops talking, and someone has thrown a knife into his back. He collapses and the knife thrower is revealed to be none other than Jack Krauser, so that was the man that Lord Sadler was talking to in Leon's vision earlier. He retrieves a sample of amber from Luis's body and says that he's recovering stolen goods. Leon realizes that it was Krauser that kidnapped Ashley on a walk home from university, and the two engage in a knife duel. During their fight, Krauser seems to exhibit some superhuman abilities. He also makes reference to what happened during Operation Javier, that his whole unit was wiped out and the US government abandoned him. And this much is true according to a reporter who tried to write about it. Apparently not even the high-ranking members of the government knew about Operation Javier, only the president. The whole thing was buried. The reporter stated that a small unit was sent to South America to eradicate the drug cartels, and that only Krauser survived, that the US wiped out the unit, not the cartels, as the US had abandoned them. Now, from how Operation Javier actually went down, this report is wildly different. Leon doesn't even get mentioned in it, likely because his presence there was top secret. Officially, of course, Leon was never there. Now, breaking from the story to talk about some continuity, something needs to be said about this, because this adds a new and unnecessary layer of confusion to what really happened in South America, and complicates the narrative in terms of Krauser's link to Leon, for those that care about the lore. I mean, Krauser even has the scar on his arm from where he got injured in Darkside Chronicles, as well as having superhuman abilities. I don't know why they'd made such a big retcon for a title, Darkside Chronicles, that they're probably not ever going to revisit. At first I thought they may release a short DLC for Operation Javier, but no, that never happened. I guess that retcon will just be hanging there forever now. My personal opinion is they could have just stuck with what happened in Darkside Chronicles, but anyway, mild rant over, let's get back to the story. Leon is confused as to why Krauser would choose to work for these people. With Krauser about to win the fight and kill Leon, a barely alive Luis shoots the knife out of Krauser's hand, and he then leaves, disappointed in Leon. With Luis dying, he gives Leon the key to his laboratory, asking him to go there and remove the parasites inside him and Ashley. Helping him light one last cigarette, Luis passes away hoping that he's done enough to repay the world for what he's done. So Luis was born in Valdalobos, but was raised by his grandfather who enjoyed hunting, and Luis would hunt with him. Luis had a very sharp mind. One day though, Luis's grandfather would get attacked by a wolf whilst out hunting, and would go on to show strange symptoms. Little did he know that he was infected with the Plaga parasite. He got worse over time, going mad with rumours spreading around the village. Chief Mendez, wanting to stop whatever this was from spreading, burned Luis's grandfather's house down with Luis's grandfather in it, and he would die. Luis simply left the village without saying a word. He then enrolled in university, managing to obtain a degree in biology, and who should come and acquire his talents? Umbrella, of course. Now get this, you may have spotted it in part 1, but Luis worked at Umbrella's European lab, named the 6th Laboratory, which is of course the laboratory that created the Nemesis Alpha parasite. Luis resigned, and as mentioned, when Umbrella fell, the authorities started looking for anyone with ties to Umbrella, but Luis was long gone and had gone back to Valdalobos. At this point, Luis had started working for Los Illuminados, and he and the other researchers discovered the mutations of the parasite, creatures such as Elegante and U3. Sadler actually hired Luis to find the weaknesses in the Plaga and find a way to remove it, and he did of course by way of the machine that can remove a Plaga. But Sadler only wanted him to do this so he could make the Plaga even more powerful and harder to extract. Realizing what he'd done, this is when Luis contacted Ada and her employer after he'd obtained a sample of the amber. He would give it to them in exchange for help escaping. But back to the story. Pushing on, Leon gets a call from Ada, and she tells him that Salazar has taken Ashley to the top of the clock tower. Taking a cable car over to yet another part of the castle, Salazar is there, and he seems pretty annoyed that Leon is not dead yet. Fighting his way to the top of the clock tower, Leon moves around the scaffolding there and sees Salazar and his zealots with Ashley. Following them inside, Krauser is there with Salazar, and he's saying that he delivered the girl as promised, and he then tells Krauser that he hopes Lord Sadler doesn't forget the loyalty of his servant. Krauser then walks off with Ashley over his shoulder. Left there with Salazar, Leon is tired of him talking all the time, so he shoots him. However, this doesn't have the effect Leon was hoping for, as Salazar is infected with Las Plagas, and he then mutates into something horrific. With Salazar himself the obvious weak spot, Leon tries to evade the attacks of this mutated form, which include him spewing the black liquid at him, and he ultimately defeats him. Going after Ashley, Leon finds a boat and Ada shows up. She has the key to the boat, so she and Leon use it to travel over to an island, and he takes this opportunity to ask her about Raccoon City. He asks her if she's changed or if she's just using him like she did before. She then makes her getaway, leaving Leon with the boat. He finds an entry point onto the island, sees Krauser with Ashley, and he sees this island is essentially a base for a large militia belonging to Los Illuminados. Ada, meanwhile, is watching over Krauser kneeling before Sadler, and handing him the amber. Wesker shows up. He tells her that their plans have changed slightly, and he hands over a device to override the comms terminal on the island. Back with Leon, either fighting or sneaking his way through a large number of Los Illuminados militia, he makes it inside the base itself. Eventually spots Ashley, who has been tied up and left in a room. He shouts at her to wake up, but she's non-responsive. Needing to find a way to get to her, Leon has found the labs and spots some pretty horrific abominations. These are BOW's Los Illuminados researchers created called Regeneradors, and as the name suggests, they regenerate, and very quickly. So Leon, in order to defeat them, needs to use a thermal imaging scope to see where the parasites are and destroy them, as these parasites act almost like vital organs. Leon also finds other disturbing experiments had been carried out here. Having managed to find a keycard in the labs, Leon uses it to get to Ashley, and it's not good, as she's pretty close to being completely taken over by the Plaga. They need to get to Luis's lab and get the parasites out now. For now though, Leon gives her the suppressant he got from Luis, and this will buy her a bit more time. Leon's suppressant is starting to wear out though. A bit later, Ashley comes to, and Ada calls again. Leon asks her where the lab with the parasite removal equipment could be, and she says that Los Illuminados' most important facilities are at their sanctuary, which is at the top of the mountain. Little does Leon know that she is actually just above them, as she's been watching them. Leon and Ashley make their way through various industrial areas, fighting more Regeneradors, which are now able to mutate, along with many more of the militia members. Leon and Ashley find what Los Illuminados consider so valuable, and they are in a storeroom full of amber which contains the parasites. A note here to anyone handling it implores them to handle the amber with obedience, so as not to disturb the slumber of the holy body. Lord Sadler walks in mumbling about this holy body. His apostles pull back his hood, and his head is covered in some sort of growth. He introduces himself as Osman Sadler, the speaker for their lord. Leon shoots Sadler, but this does nothing, and instead, Sadler does something to him and Ashley by controlling the Plaga inside them, telling them to abandon their bodies and to obey the voice of the Lord. Sadler forces Ashley to pick up Leon's gun, and she resists, instead shooting 2 of Sadler's apostles. Thankfully, the gun only had these 2 rounds in it. Sadler says that his faithful disciples will deliver them their penance. Ashley is then forced to walk off with Sadler, whilst Leon can only watch. Going after Ashley, Leon finds a tent with a photo of him in his RPD uniform with the words, "I'm waiting," written on it. He also left a voice message for him, telling him that he's prepared a battlefield up ahead, just for them. Moving into the area ahead, sure enough, Krauser is up there as expected. Leon assumes that Krauser is doing this for revenge against the US government, but this only enrages him, saying that he had a revelation in the jungle. The most important thing in this world is pure, unadulterated power. Los Illuminados have given him that. A battle then takes place between Leon and Krauser in the old ruins, and eventually Leon asks if they're done here. But they're not. Oh no. Krauser wants to showcase that power he was talking about, and his arm, the one he injured in South America, mutates, forming some kind of blade. He mutates even further, and he and Leon fight on top of a tower. Defeating him in battle, he stabs Krauser through the heart, killing him. Continuing to go after Ashley, Leon looks over the Los Illuminados sanctuary. They have a lot of defenses, and he sees Ashley with them. But he's got a job to do, and he begins his trek to the sanctuary. He is fired upon, but a chopper pilot called Mike, the guy who was initially sent to extract Leon and Ashley, shows up and offers some firepower. With Mike's help, Leon is able to battle his way through the defenses. Unfortunately, Mike's chopper is attacked by Novistadors, which bring the chopper down, and poor Mike is killed. Sadler shows his face, indicating that he commanded these freaks to attack. Leon takes them all out. Ada, meanwhile, reaches the commons facility, where she comes into contact with a BOW by the name of Martinico, which is now almost indestructible thanks to experiments on it involving the amber. She makes it to the comms terminal and realizes that Wesker is going to blow up the entire island, and thereby he intends to kill Ashley too. Wesker tells Ada the weak serve the strong, and he's told that he's arranged transport off of the island once she gets the amber. However, Ada cannot let Wesker do this, so she limits the damage these explosives will do to the island. Leaving the facility, she manages to defeat Martinico after she skillfully avoids lasers in a hallway which slice and dice poor Martinico. Rest in pieces. Now, spurred on to avenge Mike, Leon works his way through the rest of Los Illuminados' militia until he reaches the sanctuary. He finds Ashley laid out on a stone altar. He is stopped in his tracks by Sadler, who tells him he wants to share this gift with as many people as possible. He says they are all connected through the holy body. He says Leon's flesh, his bones, and his thoughts are already one with them. But let's stop a minute and look into who Los Illuminados are, along with how the Plagas ended up in Vardalobos. So where on earth did Osman Sadler come from? Well, Lord Sadler's ancestors went back quite a long way, and they shared the same fervour for Las Plagas, even continuing their worship of it after they were banished from the island by the Salazar Castellan at the time. Their banishment from the mainland resulted their settling on this island. Hester, Keenan, and Adam Sadler were just a few of Osman Sadler's ancestors. They wrote the Los Illuminados Bible, if you like, which talked of praising the holy insects and that they have been promised paradise on earth. They left behind epitaphs, and according to the epitaph from Adam Sadler, on which the Roman numerals translate to the year 1554, it was here that Adam found his faith. This was the start of the cult and the discovery of the Plaga parasite. As said before, the holy insects. Just under 200 years later, in 1741, Hester Sadler explained how the cult had been expelled from the mainland by the militant wicked. This is obviously talking about the Salazars and how the mines had been sealed up by the Salazar family, which, in the cult's eyes, was a massive sin. Fast forward to when Osman Sadler became the leader of Los Illuminados. He wanted more power and influence, and the best way he could achieve that was to gain access to the mines underneath the Salazar family castle. The Castellan at this time, Diego Salazar's son, who we know as Ramon, began to suffer from a terrible illness. Ramon's mother, Catalina, invited Los Illuminados to treat her son, despite Diego forbidding this, since his family had banished them centuries earlier. Los Illuminados introduced a dominant Plaga into Ramon's body, and this did save him. The cult killed Diego and Catalina went missing, with Ramon then becoming the 7th Castellan of the Salazar family. This is the point at which Sadler would manipulate Ramon. He converted and became a member of the cult, giving Los Illuminados access to that which they most desired. Access to the amber and the parasites contained within it. This was after Sadler guilt-tripped Ramon into feeling bad for what his ancestors stole from the cult. Thus, Ramon unsealed the mines. With them being allowed back into the mines, the cult recruited an excavation team, but upon entering the mines they found that the dust from the fossils had Plaga spores in it, and these had infected the excavation crews and they had grown full-size Plagas inside their bodies. One problem they ran into was that once controlled by the Plaga, the host became so simple-minded that they were incapable of any sort of complex task. So to tackle that, they created a superior species which would allow the host's cognitive functions to be unaffected. Sadler's plan was to infect Ashley with this superior species and then send her back home, as she would be the one to spread this gift. The researcher who had achieved this breakthrough, Annabel Escudero, planned to administer this superior Plaga to the high-ranking researchers, and that, of course, included Luis, which was how he got infected. Truth be told, Sadler had more interest in the Plaga's ability to control, as opposed to their abilities to produce powerful bioweapons. Sadler was impressed that a single injection could turn an otherwise hostile person into a faithful servant. Which leads us on to the villagers. I previously mentioned that the small village of Valdalobos was Catholic, so Sadler would target Chief Mendez. In his second volume of the village records, we can see here that Mendez wrote about a strange group of black-robed people entering into the village, and they raised their flag with a sort of spider-type insignia on it, preaching about salvation and forgiveness. They had injected the villagers with something they claimed would cure the villagers of madness. Then, as detailed in the third volume of Mendez's village records, we can see that the villagers had completely changed. The farming and the agricultural responsibilities were being neglected, and the cows not being fed were growing thin. Less workers meant no crops were being harvested, and villagers started starving. But their loyalty and devotion to their new lord, Osman Sadler, did not wane. They adored him so much that they abandoned their Catholic faith in exchange for this new one, and they'd be referred to as ganados, which means cattle. By the winter, 30 villagers had died from starvation, so 5 cows were slaughtered. Lots were cast, and 6 villagers were chosen for Lord Sadler, and this number only increased over the coming weeks. It may have seemed to the villagers that Los Illuminados had come out of nowhere, but in fact, they had been nearby on the island, where they'd not only been researching and adapting the ancient parasitic organism, but had also built up the large militia on the island. Jack Krauser had helped Los Illuminados build the island's defences, and he had been swayed by Los Illuminados' ambitions and world domination. But back to it for now. Leon convulses in pain, while Sadler screams about the mercy the Plagas bring. Thankfully, Sadler's control of Leon is broken as Ada shoots at him, having heard a distress call from a tracker she placed on Leon. She says she'll cover him, so Leon grabs Ashley and sets off to find Luis's lab, whilst Ada engages Sadler in battle. Ada defeats him and grabs the amber, but he isn't dead, and he knocks her out. Carrying Ashley, Leon has visions, clearly on his way to becoming one with the body, just as Sadler said. Making it to the lab and using Luis's key, they've got to the equipment. Leon places Ashley on the chair, and he starts the procedure. It's painful as it uses radiation to burn the parasite out of the body, but it's successful. However, Leon collapses. He comes to not long after, and it seems that Ashley saved him by performing the procedure on him herself. With them both now parasite-free, Ashley shows Leon a map which shows how they can get out of there, so they go and prepare to leave the island. Before leaving though and having a snoop on the computer there, Leon reads that Luis found an amber sample, and that testing it contains the same organ found in Sadler, which is a dominant species plaga, only this one, when fully mature, could surpass even Sadler's strength. On attempting to leave, Leon spots Ada tied up and hanging from a chain. Sadler clearly left her here as bait. Leon tells Ashley to stay there and he descends via the elevator. He shoots her bindings, freeing her, but Leon is immediately swarmed by Novistadors. Sadler appears and grabs Leon with a horrid tentacle. Ada then returns the favour and interrupts Sadler. Both of them fire on him and he mutates while still telling them they should be one with them, and that they require absolution. Targeting his weak points, Leon fights mutated Sadler, defeating him, but he mutates again and has now grown to a ridiculous size. With Leon below and peppering him with firepower, Ada rushes to provide Leon with something with a little bit more kick. So she fights through militiamen and throws down a rocket launcher, and Leon gladly picks it up and fires it at Sadler. Leon then gets up close and stabs Sadler with his own staff, and he's finally dead. With the amber sample lying next to him, Leon goes to pick it up, but Ada does so before him. She says that she and Luis had an arrangement, and she promises to take good care of it. A chopper arrives to extract her, and she asks if he wants a lift. But Leon says it's best if they go their separate ways. With the bombs that Wesker had placed around the base now being on a timer, Ada chucks him a set of keys for a jet ski. Leon needs to get out of there with Ashley and they descend in the elevator. On the jetty, they see a plaga inside a tube, along with 2 infected militiamen convulsing on the ground as Sadler is dead. Using the jet ski, they speed through the collapsing tunnels and manage to escape, and their ordeal is over. Back on Ada's chopper, she holds up the amber and contacts Wesker. He is happy and Ada asks him what he's planning to do with the sample, and he, rather annoyed, tells her that he doesn't pay her to ask questions. Wesker says a new dawn is breaking, that 100 may die if one is able to live. Ada asks if this means millions will die, but Wesker replies, billions. She rolls her eyes, sarcastically saying, how ambitious. She then pulls a gun on the pilot and tells him they're changing course. Wesker hears Control asking why they're flying off course and smirks. Someone then tells Wesker that the explosions failed to detonate simultaneously and that only 50% of the island has been destroyed, which he realizes was the work of Ada. He wonders what he should do with Ada, and the guy he is in conversation with tells Wesker that her chopper is still in range, but Wesker lets her go. It seems that Ada betraying him has no impact on what he wants to do next. In fact, he preempted it, as he walks over to Krauser's body, which he'd recovered after Leon had killed him, as Krauser has a dominant plaga sample in him, so Wesker has what he needs. He walks out onto the deck of a ship, saying that the sun will soon set on the Age of Man. In 2005, the BSAA had gotten word that Il-Viltra were back. BSAA Director Clive O'Brien sent in 2 BSAA agents to investigate, and these 2 were Chris Redfield and Jessica Sherowat. In the meantime, O'Brien meets Jill Valentine and her new partner Parker Luciani on the Italian coastline as they check out some of the washed-up wreckage from Terragrigia. He says a number of mysterious carcasses have started washing up on the beach there. O'Brien tells Jill and Parker that he sent Chris and Jessica in to investigate, and Jill and Parker get to work in scanning these strange carcasses. Scanning reveals significant signs of viral infection, but they need to wait for the results to come back from HQ. O'Brien then gets a call about Chris and Jessica. They were sent to a mountain range in Finland in order to investigate Il-Viltra's rumoured new base, where the group was said to be hiding out. However, they lost contact with the BSAA, so O'Brien sends Jill and Parker to investigate. Only coordinates have placed Chris and Jessica on board one of Il-Viltra's former cruise liner bases, the Queen Zenobia. Arriving at the ship, they board and the place is a mess, with bio-waste everywhere, along with dead crew members, some of them showing mutations that Jill has not seen before. Searching a load of bio-waste, Jill finds a gun in it, and they're relieved to see it doesn't belong to Chris or Jessica. Almost immediately, they encounter a monster. Scanning it after putting it down, Jill notices the reading shows a lot of similarities to the carcasses on the shore by the Terragrigia ruins. Finding a holding cell, Jill spots Chris inside. Needing to find the key to the cell, Jill and Parker move through the Queen Zenobia, and they encounter more monsters. Jill hears a woman scream at some point, and investigating, she finds a woman being attacked, rather viciously, by a couple of BOWs. Taking them down, she checks on the woman and doesn't recognize her or a uniform, which means she may be part of another organization. Having picked up a key off the woman's body, Jill heads back over to the room Chris is in and uses the key. It turns out this is just a mannequin. Parker turns to something hanging on the wall and it's one of the banners of Veltro. A gas then gets pumped into the room which knocks out Jill and Parker. Someone approaches them, a Veltro member, and the person behind the gas mask tells them it's time they learn the truth. So where are Chris and Jessica if they're not here? Well, it turns out they're alright. They're in the mountains, so of course they lost radio contact with the BSAA. Chris says that Veltro's hideout shouldn't be far, just on the other side of the peak. Moving forward, they spot a plane crash into the mountain, and investigating the crash site, Chris and Jessica spot cargo with biohazard symbols on it. Not a good sign. It contains the same bio-waste that was found on the Italian coastline. They then find the pilot dead. Chris suspects him to be Veltro, and he finds a flight plan. On it, it states that the plane was headed for a nearby airport. With this now the location where Veltro could be, they need to head through a mine nearby, and inside they come into contact with infected wolves, and they put them down. All signs are pointing to Veltro being back from the dead. Pushing further into the mines, Chris hurts his leg and has to hold off multiple wolves. Jessica catches up to him and helps him up, and he's recovered, so they continue on. Getting eyes on the airport, the signal clears up, so O'Brien makes contact with Chris. Chris tells O'Brien where they are, but now O'Brien is frustrated, since he'd sent Jill and Parker off to the Queen Zenobia, and he now realises it was a trap, which is why they've gone silent. Jessica brings Chris's attention to something at the airstrip, and it's a Veltro flag, hanging from the control tower. They put two and two together, realising that Veltro set the trap for the BSAA, and they walked right into it. Chris says that he and Jessica will go after Jill and Parker, and O'Brien gives them authorization. Back on the Queen Zenobia, Jill wakes up in one of the guest cabins. Parker makes contact with her, and their main priority should be to regroup. Managing to find a screwdriver so she's able to escape from her confinement, Jill makes her way through the guest areas and meets up with Parker in the dining hall. Going to retrieve their weapons, their next objective is to get to the ship's bridge in order to make contact with the BSAA and tell them what's going on. Getting to the bridge, they find that the communication systems are completely destroyed. Unable to change their course either, Parker says that the person who sabotaged the comms is probably not far away. They then see an explosion, and the tugboat they used to get there has been blown up. Jill is then grabbed from behind by someone, but she gets away. It's revealed to be Raymond Vesta, who pulls a gun on them, and Parker fires a shot. The shot misses, and Parker finally recognizes him. He wants to know why the FBC are there, and Raymond walks away, saying that they don't even know who they're fighting, and nothing will change unless they get their hands dirty. Parker thinks they should search the ship for answers as to what the FBC are doing there, so they find a map, and Jill sees there's an emergency communication room on the ship. Fighting their way across the ship, Jill and Parker also find accounts of the Veltro members on the ship, who wrote about there being monsters tearing the ship apart. Unfortunately, getting to the entrance to the comms door, they find it locked shut, and they'll need a key. Thankfully, a note was left next to the door stating that the comms officer has the key, and that he will have been on the promenade deck. Going there, they have to fight a load of BOWs, and they kill the guy that used to be the comms officer, grabbing the key. Using the key back at the door to the comms room, they enter, and they find Raymond in there. He claims he wasn't the one to sabotage the equipment, and that they all got there too late. A video feed appears on the screen though, and it's a member of Veltro. It's playing back at BSAA headquarters as well, and whoever this Veltro member is has the T-Abyss virus, and he says the group will use it to infect 1/5 of the Earth's waters. He gives a demonstration of the terrifying capabilities of this virus. The man takes off his mask, and he's revealed to be the leader of Veltro, Jack Norman, who is still alive. Chris and Jessica are also watching from aboard their chopper. Jack Norman says, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here," quoting Dante Alighieri. Chris tells O'Brien to send a team to the airstrip back in Finland to try and find something linked to the Queen Zenobia. So O'Brien decides to send a pair of agents called Quint and Keith. Quint is dismayed as he hates the snow. Meanwhile, Chris and Jessica will continue their search for the ship. On the Queen Zenobia, Parker is annoyed, as is Raymond, because as far as they knew, they had killed this group already. Parker is even more annoyed that they're on the ship, and they're wanting to stage another attack. Raymond then walks off, stating that Veltro seek the truth about Terragrigia, and that they seek vengeance. Parker says they need to get power restored to the ship, as it's currently running on emergency power. Grabbing a key off Raymond, he says that he lost contact with his FBC partner Rachel, and this must be Rachel. Anyway, making their way through the casino, Jill and Parker head back down to the lower decks, and in the room where fake Chris was being kept, they find a note detailing the plan. The two targets, Jill and Parker, would be there soon, and it mentions spy props designed to cause confusion, and that this is the main mission, to confuse the targets. Heading back into the room where she saw Rachel get killed by the BOWs, Jill finds her journal there and she detailed what happened. She states that she was forced to come on this mission and writes that she found the UAV drone used to spread the virus in Terragrigia. She says that from the attack, her head hurt and she lost an eye, and her arms were starting to feel weird too. It split open and she could see her bones. Bad news is that she's up and walking about somewhere on the ship. Rachel runs off and Jill engages her in battle upon catching up to her. eventually bringing Rachel down alongside Parker. They needed to as well, as she had the key to the lift on her. Now they were able to head down via the lift and to the bilge pumps. Hearing something down there, and nothing good, they prepare themselves for what they may encounter. Meanwhile, Quint and Keith have arrived at the airstrip in Finland. They speak with the BSAA guys already there, and they say they've found an underground chamber, but that there's no sign of Veltro there at the airstrip. Investigating, they find something from the security cameras, and it's of a plane getting ready to take off. Only Veltro's guys are attacked and killed by a BOW, and this explains why the cargo plane went down earlier. They see stuff moving there in the underground area, but no sign of anything causing it. Quint is adamant that it's a poltergeist, but they move on regardless. They find a dongle that Quint says he can use to pull the data off the cargo plane. They move out in order to head to the crash site, and back with Jill and Parker, they've reached the bilge passageway and hear the sound of rushing water. Checking out a bunch of monitors there, they hear a warning that the bilge is flooded and that the bulkheads cannot be lowered during a power outage. They'll need to get to the engine room to restore the power first. So they move through the partially flooded corridors and fight various BOWs, and after a while they manage to reach the engine room and power everything up. Unfortunately, they get locked in the room and water starts to pour in, flooding it, and with the water level rising fast, they need to act quickly. Meanwhile, Quint and Keith got to the crash site after fighting more wolves, and they encounter the so-called poltergeist they saw at the airstrip. It's a new type of hunter that is able to make itself invisible to the naked eye. Taking out all the hunters, they insert the dongle they found at the plane's terminal. By doing this, Quint finds something, saying they need to contact HQ ASAP. They found the coordinates for the ship that Chris and Jessica are still trying to locate. Quint then tells Keith that it seems they aren't the only ones looking for the ship, and he thinks that Veltro are trying to look for it. With the ship's coordinates locked in, Chris and Jessica have finally located it. Infiltrating the ship, they begin their search for Jill and Parker. They too encounter many BOWs in their search. They take the elevator down to the bilge, and Jill and Parker are still struggling, and very soon the room they're trapped in will be completely underwater. Heading through the bilge, which is no longer underwater, Chris and Jessica enter the engine room, but it's not underwater. What's more is that Jill and Parker are not there. Chris and Jessica are on the wrong ship. They're on the Queen Semiramis, the sister ship of the Queen Zenobia. Back on the Zenobia, Jill thinks fast and dives underwater, finding a pipe in order to force open a hatch so they can escape through it. Having survived this ordeal, they still manage to get the power back on, so they head back to the bulkhead controls. Checking the control system, it's indicating that the antenna array is out of action. Seeing it's up on the observation deck, they move back at the ship so they can take care of it. Meanwhile, Chris calls O'Brien, who tells him they've still not been able to locate the Queen Zenobia. O'Brien thinks the other ship must be close by. With Jill and Parker heading through the hall to the observation deck, in the hall, they encounter yet another strange and grotesque BOW. Defeating this one too, they push onwards and the BOW is back for war. It's massive, but with enough firepower, they eventually bring the sucker down. Ascending, they get to the antenna and fix the wiring, and Jill is finally able to contact O'Brien, who tells them the whole thing was a setup. Asking him how he knows that, he ignores them, and tells them he has an emergency call. Someone's calling him and saying they intercepted an emergency call from something called the ESF, the European Security Force, and that they've reported satellite movement. The solar energy matrix satellite is being reactivated and is on the move. O'Brien realizes that someone has found the Queen Zenobia and is going to destroy it using the satellite. O'Brien looks at a copy of The Divine Comedy on his desk and at a photo of both himself and FBC director Morgan Lansdale. O'Brien suspects the someone targeting the Zenobia is Lansdale. He immediately contacts Parker, telling him that all hell is about to break loose, and Parker asks him to get him out of there. But O'Brien says that he cannot authorize it as there's no time to mount a rescue, and that Chris is traveling by sea and will not reach them in time. O'Brien says that he'll do what he can to stop the attack, and they're contacted by Quint, who is aware of the situation. He, the crafty genius, suggests that they confuse the satellite's targeting system somehow. He tells them to sit tight inside the ship until he's worked out how to do it. Not long after, he calls them and tells them to use the UAV drone to do it, and according to Quint, it should be in a container on the ship's foredeck. With no time to lose, Jill and Parker make their way over there, on the way having to deal with a still alive Rachel. On the foredeck, they have to contend with a bunch of hunters, but they find the container in question. Meanwhile, at the FBC headquarters, O'Brien calls Morgan Lansdale. It seems they haven't spoken since the incident in Terragrigia. All Lansdale says to him is that he's too late. What the old man is not aware of, though, is that Jill and Parker are about to scupper his plan. Having assembled the drone, they rush over to the ship's control room in order to use the pilot controls. Whilst they're making their way there, O'Brien asks if it's a bit premature to be using the solar matrix to destroy the Queen Zenobia, but Lansdale is nothing if not determined. He says, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here," the exact same thing Jack Norman said. He then activates a 4-minute countdown timer, 4 minutes until the Zenobia is going to be sat at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. Having made their way to the control room, Jill and Parker launch the UAV, and it spits out chaff in order to confuse the satellite's targeting system. The satellite destroys the UAV as was planned, but the beam causes a large wave to hit the ship. Lansdale then contacts O'Brien, saying that immediate containment is imperative as too much is at stake. He calls O'Brien a humanist with no cause, who responds by telling Lansdale he's playing with fire and that he will get burned. Lansdale responds by implying that loose ends only ever exacerbate the situation, and tells him to be careful. A veiled threat if ever there was one. With the Zenobia in danger of sinking, Jill and Parker need to get off it. Unfortunately, they have to swim quite a lot of the way, since the ship is partially underwater, and eventually they hear from Chris, who tells them that the ship's done for, that they cannot allow the T-Abyss virus to contaminate the ocean. They're nearby, and will be at the Zenobia soon. As they approach the Zenobia, Chris thinks they see something in the water. Sure enough, there's a BOW they need to take down before they can get onto the ship, so firing on it from the mounted guns on the hovercraft, they are able to get aboard. With Jill and Parker getting back to the casino, they spot the Veltro member who is wearing the gas mask, and he applauds them. Bizarrely, he calls them friends, and because they stopped the Regia Solis, the solar matrix, he will tell them what he knows. He asks them why it took so long to find the Queen Zenobia. Why did all traces of Veltro vanish after the Terragrigia Panic? Why is someone trying to use the Regia Solis to destroy the Zenobia? The answers will reveal an inconvenient truth, but before he can say any more, he is shot and falls from the balcony, and he was shot by Jessica. Chris asks why she fired, but she says she protected their people. Parker rushes over to take the mask off of the Veltro guy, but it's Raymond. He tells Parker to find out the truth about Terragrigia, and he dies. With the ship still in danger of sinking, Chris says that he thinks he knows where the Zenobia's lab is, having searched the identical Semiramis hours earlier, and Parker will try find a way to delay the ship sinking. He takes Jessica with him, and Jill and Chris team up. Swimming and fighting their way through the bowels of the ship, Chris and Jill arrive at the lab where they find some interesting information about the research into T-Abyss. During an expedition into the Kermadec Trench, the Montpellier Marine University discovered a deep-sea predatory fish. Despite the high water pressure, this fish retained a high degree of motility and ferocity. They discovered these traits weren't biological, but were viral. This helped them settle on the name of the virus, calling it the Abyss, adapted to the harsh deep-sea environment into ones not usually found in deep-sea water, and why and how these fish were able to survive. They imagined that if they could use the virus to produce a BOW, then they will have moved light years ahead in terms of bioweapon research. They worked very hard then to improve the virus's effectiveness. And pushing further into the labs, they find the research area where T-Abyss is kept. Whilst they are searching the labs, back in the cold of the Finnish mountains, Quint and Keith are freezing their knackers off, and Quint is still checking out the plane's terminal. Unfortunately for him, the terminal goes dead. Whilst Keith tries to fix it, Quint mentions that this whole conspiracy is becoming clearer. He says that they need to get back to the airstrip. After a little trek, they arrive back at the airstrip, and he says he has a theory about Veltro, but that he is in need of more intel. Searching for a PC in a section they haven't searched yet, they end up having to fight off a load of BOWs, namely those invisible hunters they encountered, along with infected wolves, and Quint is finally able to use the PC. Quint finds something on who is behind Veltro, and he calls this mysterious someone. They get through. O'Brien. Quint has put it all together and realised that Veltro is not back at all, and it was all a smokescreen orchestrated by O'Brien himself, all to get into the head of Morgan Lansdale. Quint has something he says he may want to see in the logs. However, a server connection error pops up, and Quint says they've been detected. A pre-arranged airstrike then hits the airport, with O'Brien desperately trying to make contact with them. Back in the labs on the Zenobia, they make their way through the various security gates and find a research report into T-Abyss, which states that if a concentrated liquid form of the virus was to be released into a large area of the sea, then all the world's oceans would be contaminated in a short time. It seems the researcher working here was actually under the impression they'd be working to prevent bioterrorism and bioterror outbreaks. A parasite inside a host, when affected by the T-Abyss virus, as well as the host itself, results in unique mutations which helped steer BOW development when it came to T-Abyss. They would use this parasite to infect the host by secreting liquid that contains the virus. The size the parasite, by the name of Malacoda, would grow to depends on the size of the host. One particular Veltro agent's journal down here mentions the virus being released on the ships somehow, and it mentions someone betraying Veltro, someone they call their financier. But who could that be? Jill also comes across a deceased researcher. He's carrying a very interesting infection log that mentions Morgan Lansdale by name, stating that the research team had developed a vaccine for T-Abyss, telling Lansdale about it, but he was uncharacteristically happy about this, which they found strange. The moment they sent the research data over, the lab doors were locked shut and the BOWs were released from cryosleep. He mentions that Lansdale was the one that gave Veltro the T-Abyss virus to use in the Terragrigia Panic, and that is how they even managed to develop this vaccine in the first place. He then used his authority to order the Regia Solis, the Solar Matrix, to destroy the city, covering it all up. The researcher writes that the world is scared of this virus now, so the FBC's powers have now been strengthened. Seems that Lansdale got what he wanted though, and he betrayed Veltro and Jack Norman by remote releasing the T-Abyss virus on the ships, thereby wiping out a large number of Veltro's members. Jill receives the prototype vaccine from the dead researcher and tells Chris about Lansdale's involvement. However, they have nothing concrete in order to be able to nail him for it yet. Jill injects herself with the prototype vaccine, meaning that she's now immune to T-Abyss. Downloading the password data from the mainframe, it's a damn good job Jill injected herself with the T-Abyss vaccine because the T-Abyss liquid comes flooding into the room. Swimming through it and avoiding BOWs, Jill reunites with Chris and uses the password that she obtained in order to neutralize the virus. Morgan Lansdale pops up on the screens there, with him sarcastically telling them, "Well done," and saying that his only mistake was not accounting for their involvement in this. More BOWs drop into the room and Jill and Chris fight them off. Once they're dealt with, the virus finishes neutralizing, and Lansdale says that he has a great weakness, that he's fearful of things, even little things, and that means he must clean up every last imperfection. He says the BSAA and O'Brien have caused him nothing but trouble, and he reveals that he's targeting the Queen Semiramis. But let's pause here and rewind all the way back to when Chris and Jill departed the casino. Parker and Jessica leave the casino to try and find a way to delay the sinking of the ship. Parker says they need to get to the bridge and activate the bulwarks, and hopefully it'll prevent it sinking, but Jessica says it's better if they split up as she needs to check on something first. Parker arranges to meet up with her on the bridge. Making his way there and fighting BOWs on the way, Parker gets there but he finds Jessica up there. He realises that she is a spy, a mole, that infiltrated the BSAA and she was working for and relaying information back to Morgan Lansdale. She reaches for a big red button, but Parker prevents her from doing so. Raymond is revealed to be alive, thanks to wearing a Kevlar vest when Jessica shot him in order to prevent him spilling info about Lansdale, and he says that Jessica is trying to activate the ship's self-destruct sequence to destroy evidence that will implicate Lansdale. Parker tells Raymond to put his gun down, but he responds by telling Parker he's too soft. Whilst they are distracted, Jessica reaches for a weapon, goes to shoot Raymond, but Parker takes the bullet. Jessica then activates the ship's self-destruct sequence, and she says that she knew O'Brien had a lapdog, indicating that the mole inside the FBC was in fact Raymond, and that she'll tell Morgan that it was him. Parker tells Raymond to go after Jessica, and he sits there, awaiting the inevitable. Back with Chris and Jill again, Lansdale destroys the Queen Semiramis. At this point, Jessica, who Lansdale calls his bright young assistant, has activated the self-destruction sequence on the Zenobia. He wishes them both luck, and Chris and Jill make a mad scramble in order to try and escape the ship. On the way out, Jill finds an injured Parker and helps him along, killing various BOWs on the way. Reaching a bridge, it breaks and Parker falls. They are unable to pull him up, and he falls down into the flames below. Still needing to get off the ship, they manage to make it topside, and they find a few choppers waiting for them. Unfortunately, a massive BOW decides it's time to crash the party, so fighting it, both on the foredeck of the ship as well as in a chopper, using mounted guns, they manage to bring the thing down. Chris then fills O'Brien in on what they've learned about Lansdale, Jessica, and the FBC. Chris then tells O'Brien to come clean with him about what his involvement was. Back on the ship, Parker is still alive. Miraculously, Raymond shows up to help him and says that Jessica managed to get away. During Veltro's attack, Raymond, who was a new recruit, had overheard a phone conversation between Morgan Lansdale and Veltro's leader, Jack Norman, where Raymond would learn that the outbreak on Terragrigia was all a ploy by Lansdale in order to try and get more funding and powers for the FBC by inciting a real-life bioterrorism incident. So Raymond and O'Brien worked together in order to stage this whole Veltro revival act. That video of Jack Norman demonstrating the T-Abyss virus was actually an old video that was never released. Everything from the mountain hideout to the BSAA being on the ships was all to find and secure evidence of Morgan's involvement in what happened on Terragrigia. O'Brien says he couldn't risk telling anyone else about the plan because of the mole in the BSAA was Jessica. O'Brien then gets back to business, telling Chris and Jill that the information Quint and Keith managed to retrieve revealed a third ship called the Queen Dido. Turns out that the three ships that Veltro uses as their bases are sister ships that were owned by a subsidiary of Umbrella called the Paraguas Line Company, and when Umbrella went bust, this subsidiary was purchased on the quiet by Morgan Lansdale, who, as we learned earlier, gave these ships to Veltro so they could carry out their attack on Terragrigia. The moment O'Brien has finished telling Chris and Jill about the third ship, he looks in his drawer and inside sits a sample of the T-Abyss virus. The alarm in the building sounds and the FBC have turned up there. Lansdale then walks into O'Brien's office. He says the FBC are taking over and that the BSAA are now under the direct supervision of the FBC. Lansdale then places O'Brien under arrest for his collaboration with Veltro. The BSAA's only hope now is Chris and Jill. They have arrived at the ruins of Terragrigia, and the Queen Dido is somewhere underneath it all. Swimming to the Dido, they find an access hatch, gaining entry to the sunken ship. Swimming through it, Jill spots a load of the BOWs identical to the carcasses she and Parker had encountered on the shoreline. Finding their way into an unflooded part of the ship, Jill and Chris emerge and come across a dead FBC member, and from what it looks like, he has not been dead for very long. He's holding something and it's a voice recording. The agent, Dario Barioni, states that everyone on his team is dead, killed by the devil himself. They had been there looking for video logs, and these were evidence of Morgan Lansdale's collaboration with Jack Norman. During this conversation, Norman had threatened Morgan Lansdale, saying that he has the video logs. Anyway, the agent here states that Veltro was sat waiting for the FBC to come for this evidence. The recording then cuts out. In the next room on a long table are the bodies of Veltro agents that got infected by the T-Abyss virus that Lansdale had released onto the ships. All of them at various stages of infection, but long dead. They'd kept count of the days they'd been trapped down here by way of keeping a tally, using blood. In the next room, a recording plays of Jack Norman, who had accepted his fate. He pulls out a vial of the T-Abyss and injects himself with it, and he holds a PDA up to the camera, stating that all the interactions between him and Morgan Lansdale are on there. He says that Veltro will guard Guardians of the Truth for as many years as it may take. The video ends, and basically Chris and Jill need that PDA if they're to have any conclusive evidence of Lansdale's wrongdoing. Heading into the final room, they find Jack Norman there on a makeshift throne, talking mad about the vengeance of God. It seems that from looking at him, he's been resisting the mutation and has done so by being fixated solely on taking revenge on Lansdale. In his delirium though, he thinks Lansdale is there instead of Jill and Chris, so he drops the PDA and Jill grabs it. But now Jack Norman thinks it's time to mutate, and boy does he. He's pretty tough, but using all their firepower, Jill and Chris work together to kill him, putting an end to Jack Norman and the T-Abyss. With his dying breaths, Jack Norman says that he's glad he can now die, and he knocks over a candle with Il Veltro's flag burning up. They then upload the video evidence to the BSAA.
The means of dispersion?
The cruise ship is equipped with a UAV. That is your delivery system.
Very well. Now show me the goods.
Bonafide T-Abyss. No vaccine. Not yet.
Yes, of course. A little bit of this could turn a city inside out.
I think we're done. I'll be on my way.
Who would have thought, yes? That the lowly terrorists would receive a helping hand from the venerable commissioner of the FBC.
As you can see, it's not likely you'll be wriggling out of this one.
I seem to have underestimated the BSAA. And perhaps you as well.
We found this in the off-limits area near Terragrigia. We're done analyzing it, so you can have it back.
Director O'Brien, surely you understand our dilemma. Without the Terragrigia Panic, the ignorant masses would be unaware of the threat that lies before them.
Yes, you may in fact be correct.
No one has the right to detain me. The world required my guidance. It was all for the greater good.
You're only fooling yourself. You said yourself, abandon hope, all ye who enter here. But I'm not Dante, and you're not Virgilius. Morgan Lansdale, you are hereby relieved of your position as FBC Commissioner. And I'm placing you under arrest on suspicion of conspiring with Veltro in the planning and execution of the Terragrigia Panic.
With all due respect, Director O'Brien, the BSAA is making a huge mistake.
Where have I heard that before?
With the PDA and evidence in their possession, Chris and Jill leave the Queen Dido. They're both happy they can now reveal what happened in Terragrigia. Chris says that the BSAA will need a big overhaul. In the wake of everything that happened, Morgan Lansdale was arrested and the FBC was dissolved, and most of its agents and resources went to the BSAA. The BSAA would then be reformed into its own anti-bioterrorism organisation under the United Nations. Quint and Keith survived the airstrike on the airship, with Keith being a leader at BSAA's East African branch, but Quint would refuse promotion to any kind of leadership position, instead choosing to work in the BSAA's R&D department. Parker survived and was found washed up off the Malta coastline. After being treated for his injuries, he was back at work with the BSAA. O'Brien, since he planned the whole Veltro resurrection ruse with Raymond, stepped down as director of the BSAA, although he still helps them out in an advisory role and is currently writing a detective novel, titled Into the Abyss. As for Jessica, well, she has gone quiet, but while sat in a cafe somewhere reading a book, she is approached by Raymond. He places a sample of the T-Abyss virus on the table, to which she responds, "It was almost too easy, wasn't it?" That the company let them take Morgan out with the trash. She tells Raymond to file the report on this, meaning that the both of them were triple agents. Asking why he saved Parker, Raymond says that he had his reasons. Who are they working for? TRICELL. But let's now break and discuss the other Wesker, Alex. Oswell E. Spencer, who remember is in hiding, had plans in place to become immortal, and this involved Alex. With Spencer being on his last legs, he accepted that he wasn't going to be alive to see his dream of Ubermensch, as he was being destroyed by a disease and could barely walk. He had dreamed of becoming a god. As mentioned, he wanted to become immortal, and this is what Spencer's real goal was all along. All those people dead because of one old man's desire to cheat his own mortality. To undo what he called an unjust travesty done to him by time, he wanted to present himself as the perfect being to rule all of mankind. He believed somewhere inside some virus that Umbrella created was this key to immortality. Alex Wesker was working on this for him, and Spencer called her the last of his children. With her overseeing this immortality virus, he was confident that she could deliver it, but still, Oswell was growing increasingly concerned at the state of his frail body. Alex's research was being carried out on an island in the South Sea. After going through hundreds of test subjects, they would ask for more, but Alex reassured him that everything was running smoothly. 1 year after this research began on the immortality virus, Spencer would hear nothing from them, despite his sending thousands upon thousands of test subjects to Alex and her research team. Still, he wouldn't blame Alex due to the complexities of the work being undertaken. Spencer would attempt to stretch out whatever life was left inside his body through machines, but still, he waited. Then he heard news of a breakthrough. She'd done it. Bad news for Oswell, though, is that Alex had disappeared. But that's not all. The researchers, the test subjects, the materials, and more to the point, the virus Alex had created, all gone. Betrayed. Oswell was furious with himself and blamed himself, saying that he should have learned his lesson after Albert betrayed him. Spencer had placed his last hope in his butler Patrick, saying that Patrick was his last hope in locating the virus. According to Patrick's memoirs on his computer, he writes that Spencer had asked that Patrick track down and find Albert Wesker, telling him where he was. Patrick mentions that he'd needed to make sure the information looked like it didn't come from Spencer, so he tracked down a man named Ricardo Irving, who had a previous connection to Ada Wong, who of course had worked with Wesker herself. Now, also in 2006, the BSAA received intelligence on the location of Oswell Spencer. Their tip-off was very likely Ada Wong, so they sent in Chris and Jill. The BSAA wanted Spencer captured, due to the fact that he may know, or at least have a clue, as to the location of Albert Wesker. After they arrive at Spencer's huge estate, they find all of his security staff dead. This mansion is the one that the one in the Arklay Mountains was based upon. After managing to evade traps, they find Spencer and he's dead. A stroke of luck as Wesker is there, having killed Spencer. Ricardo Irving obviously passed on the info. Essentially, Wesker had found out from Spencer about Project W, one of his eugenics programs, which, if you didn't catch it in part 1, was a project where gifted children were raised by the ideals of Spencer himself, with all of these children having received the last name Wesker. Spencer tells Albert he's the only one that survived, but that's not entirely true. Another he created, as we've just mentioned, was called Alex Wesker, but she was told about the program, whereas this Wesker was not. He told him he was the only one, so he wouldn't go after Alex. Chris and Jill stumbling upon Wesker was not really a stroke of luck though, as Wesker, due to having superhuman abilities which Chris knows all about after getting his ass kicked back in the Antarctic, overpowers them both. With Wesker about to kill Chris, Jill throws herself at him, crashing through the window, with them both falling to their deaths. 3 years have now passed, and in 2009, in the Kijuju Autonomous Zone in West Africa, a cloaked woman wearing a mask stands over a man who is on his knees. The man convulses whilst a BSAA team arrive in the village. The man grabs the woman and something happens to him, and this mysterious woman walks off. Chris Redfield, still working for the BSAA, is sent on a mission there, and he's been sent in order to investigate possible bioorganic weapon smuggling. Ever since the fall of Umbrella, bioweapons are still finding their way onto the black market. And this new era of bioterrorism inside vulnerable countries is destabilizing the entire region. Chris meets up with his new partner, Sheva Alamar, a member of the BSAA West African branch. She mentions to Chris that tensions are high in the area due to recent changes in government following a civil war. That, coupled with the bioweapons smuggling going on, and the region being a haven for terrorists, makes Kijuju a very dangerous place. Ever since Jill's death, Chris has been wondering if this is all worth fighting for. But anyway, they need to meet up with the BSAA's Alpha team, whose mission was to capture a bioweapons smuggler named Ricardo Irving, who is conducting a black market bioweapons deal right there in Kijuju. Walking through a small village, they spot some men beating something tied up in a sack. An alarm then sounds and everyone disappears. Chris and Sheva meet up with their BSAA contact at a butcher's shop to arm up, but before they leave, the contact asks Chris what he knows about something called Ouroboros, to which Chris replies that he's only heard rumours about it and its connection to some kind of doomsday project. Not long after the contact departs, Chris and Sheva find the remains of dead animals, almost like they were sacrificed in some kind of grotesque ritual. They also find a very welcoming note that states all outsiders will receive the blade of punishment. Hearing a scream, they investigate and encounter two men forcing something into the mouth of another man. As this man struggles on the ground and convulses, the two other men run off. The man attacks Chris and Sheva, and they are forced to take him out. They leave the area but are confronted by an angry mob who chase them to an underground passage, which eventually leads them to a square. To their dismay, their contact has been captured and is executed by, well, the executioner. Chris and Sheva are then spotted by an agitator, drawing the mob upon them. They have to fight for their lives whilst awaiting backup in the form of a chopper. It eventually arrives and takes out a gate, allowing Chris and Sheva to leave. They come across a woman who is running from someone, and catching up to her, she falls into the arms of Chris, but then she changes and attacks him. Injuring the woman forces her to mutate. She's infected, and this looks strikingly similar to the Plaga Leon encountered back in Spain. They eventually find Alpha Team, but they were wiped out after Irving unleashed the BOW on them, and their leader hands Chris and Sheva a data file but then dies. It's not long before they come across the BOW which took out Alpha Team, and after defeating it with the help of a furnace, they find Alpha Team's vehicles. Little do they know they are being observed on a camera by Ricardo Irving alongside the woman in the blue cloak, and they make a swift departure. Chris uses a computer in one of the vehicles to upload the data he got from the Alpha Team's leader. He contacts HQ and tells them he's seeing similarities here to the Ganados detailed in Leon's report. HQ tells them their mission still stands, that they need to capture Irving, and they think that he's fled to the mines on the other side of the train station. Chris expresses his concern since it's just the two of them now, but HQ says that the BSAA Delta team have been dispatched and are on their way there. They will need to push on towards the mines regardless of their concerns. They do push on, seeing that this virus is also affecting animals, but Chris and Sheva get surrounded by a group of hostile locals, known as Magini, on motorbikes. They're saved by the BSAA Delta team led by Captain Josh Stone. Josh, who knows Sheva personally, gives Chris a data file containing pictures of research they'd collected. In one of these images is Jill, and as you'll remember, Jill plunged to her apparent death alongside Albert Wesker 3 years prior. On a desk there, Chris can find a document relating to the Plaga, and it's about to make a little bit more sense as to why they're seeing similarities here to what Leon mentioned in his report. So you'll remember that Wesker took a Plaga sample from Jack Krauser's body, and he gave this sample to TRICELL, who genetically modified it. In the aftermath of what happened in Spain, buyers on the black market were interested in the control aspect of the Plaga due to it creating obedient subjects, but many expressed a concern at the time it took from the point of infection to full maturation of the Plaga, so research began to create the Type 2 Plaga. The Type 2 meant that the Plaga was already fully matured and was introduced to the host, and that means that the host can be almost instantly controlled. The most effective method is forcing it into the mouth of the host. The plan here was to introduce it in the autonomous zone and record field data, but Chris and Sheva need to move on to find Irving. Despite their concerns due to the danger, they reach the mine and work their way through it, and on the other side confront Irving, who was rescued by the woman in the cloak. Checking out what Irving was looking at, they find pictures of what looks like oil fields, along with a map of an experiment execution area. Sheva says that the oil fields are in the marshlands, but they're interrupted by more Magini, who attack them. Shortly afterwards, Chris and Sheva have to fight another BOW, this time a sort of bat variant, and after defeating this thing, they're picked up by a member of the BSAA who drives them across the African savannah to meet up with Delta Team. They take out loads of Magini on the way across it who are on bikes, but whilst fighting them, Josh contacts them and tells them about the villagers being infected with Las Plagas, but they doesn't know what this has to do with Ouroboros. When they arrive in order to meet up with Delta Team, they find that it's been wiped out, and Josh is nowhere to be found. They then get ambushed by the thing that wiped out Delta Team. It's a huge BOW by the name of Indesu, which has parasites in its body just like El Gigante in Spain. Using mounted machine guns on a truck, they finally take it down. They then, bizarrely, are ordered to leave the area and abandon the mission itself. Chris comes clean to Sheva that although the mission sent them there, Chris receives some intel before the mission that Jill was alive, and he says that because of this he has a personal stake in the mission, and seeing all the death around them, Chris offers Sheva an out, but she chooses to stick with him, saying it's her people that are dying. After they hop aboard an airboat, Sheva reveals the reason she joined the BSAA. When she was a child, she grew up in an area in which Umbrella had a factory. The factory staff were made up from 80% of the entire population of the local area. At some point in time, the factory suffered an incident in which BOWs escaped from the tanks where they were being held, killing the researchers and workers. Umbrella did what they do best and sent in a cleanup crew. When I say clean up, I mean kill everything. Both of Sheva's parents worked at the factory and as a result they died. So that's why Sheva joined the BSAA in order to make Umbrella pay and anyone producing bioweapons for that matter. But back to the story, Chris and Sheva arrive in a place called the Marshlands, home to the Endipire, an indigenous tribe that we mentioned in part 1 and that goes back millions of years. After fighting the understandably hostile Endipire people, Chris and Sheva survive their adventure and they find documents that paint a picture of what happened here. A diary written by one of the youths in this village states that a man who said he was the foreman of the oil plant went to visit the tribe. He wanted to inoculate everyone living near the oil field in order to protect them against some disease. This foreman was Ricardo Irving. This youth was wary given that generations prior had been tricked by people who stole their land to turn it into an oil field, but the youth does say that ever since, these people have shown remorse for what they did, even building a gondola for them. Everyone in the village was happy to receive the medicine, but this youth didn't want it as he got a bad feeling from the foreman, Irving. Then, not long after getting inoculated, the villagers were speaking loudly as all the villagers' children had gotten sick. The next morning, all these children were dead. Their leader went to the oil field as he wanted to know what the medicine they were given was. He returned saying the children died because they had the disease. They were told to go back and get more shots, and this village youth was then forced to get one too. After this, the youth witnessed people starting to get very angry and were fighting one another. The youth then wrote later on about feeling something moving around inside of him. He saw people in the village covering themselves in war paint, which was normal but only on days where they hold festivals. Days later, villagers were screaming, most of the women had died, and the men were all fighting each other. The youth's diary entries then turn, and he starts to talk about wanting to kill, as he had clearly succumbed to whatever was given to the villagers. Upon reaching the oil field, they find TRICELL tents there. Sheva questions why a key funder of the BSAA is there at these oil fields. Inside one of the tents there, Chris finds a file on Type 3 plagas. So researchers had gone on to improve the plaga even further. The Type 3 was designed to display enhanced physical abilities over Type 1 and Type 2 plagas. They found that the dominant species plaga, back in Spain, provide a host with physical abilities, but these types were not only in limited number, but also caused severe physical changes. But people buying these bioweapons wanted to create controllable super soldiers, and these side effects were putting people off. Researchers thought about producing something similar to Las Plagas, but nothing would come close to the affinity Las Plaga has for human hosts. By using a subordinate plaga and implanting it with a gene from a dominant, or control plaga, they managed to produce a Type 3 plaga, which researchers believed would become the new standard when it came to the bioweapons market. However, this document mentions the field test, which the village youth wrote about. It talks about Type 3 not adhering to women and children, which is why the women just sat around and the children just died. The adherence rate for males is 92%, which is why they all started fighting each other. At this moment, therefore, this Type 3 plaga is not suitable for use commercially, and it doesn't produce an adequate product. It did bring out some more positive physical attributes in test subjects though, such as significant height increases. Reaching the oil plant, they have to fight their way through it again, and making their way through, they find an injured Josh. More Magini attack, and the 3 BSAA agents have to work together to survive. Getting outside, they spot Irving, who escapes on a boat, so Chris, Sheva, and Josh go after him. Being shot at by Magini on his boat, they manage to get on board. Now he's cornered with nowhere left to run, Irving injects himself with something. It's actually a dominant species plaga. It goes as well as one could expect, and Irving turns into a BOW which Chris and Sheva duly defeat. Interesting thing to note is that Irving's mutation is entirely dependent on the environment around him, and since he dove into water mid-mutation, this turned him into some sort of sea creature. Before dying, he mentions a name. Terragrigia, who remember is the director of the West African division of TRICELL. Chris wants to know about the Ouroboros project, and Irving mentions Ouroboros changing everything they've come to know about the world. He tells Chris and Sheva to search a nearby cave if they want to find answers. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Wesker and Excella are talking about their preparations and that they are nearly complete, and that means they can leave soon. She injects Wesker with something, and it's a serum called PG67-A. It keeps the T-virus in Wesker's body stable so that he does not lose his strength. It has to be the exact dose to have the desired effect. Excella talks about how surprised she was that Las Plagas was a success, as she had her doubts. She says that Ouroboros is complete, and tries to hit on Wesker, saying that she should be with him in this new world he's trying to build, but he's not interested in her advances. The woman in the cloak arrives, saying that the BSAA are there. The mere mention of Chris causes Wesker to smirk, but he says the Ouroboros plan is in its final stages and he won't tolerate any delays. Chris and Sheva search this cave, and it turns out to be the ancient underground civilization that was and still is the home to the Endipaya tribe. They seem to be fiercely guarding something, and sure enough, Chris and Sheva soon find out what that is. The flower, or more specifically the Son-Trap flower, known as the Stairway to the Sun, but this flower needs to grow and maintain itself under very specific conditions, hence why they built this underground city to let in as much natural light as possible. So as explained back in part 1, the Endipaya tribe used a strange flower in rituals called the Son-Trape. This flower was discovered by a British explorer called Henry Travis, and Oswell E. Spencer had Brandon Bailey and Dr. James Marcus go and find out more about it. They discovered that the flowers contained within them an RNA virus that would go on to be the progenitor virus, which would itself be developed into the T virus. So the flowers are the start of everything. Whilst there, they spot a site very familiar to them, as they were able to spot the Umbrella logo on some very old equipment, and they also spot more TRICELL tents. Journeying into a facility built into the rock, where Brandon Bailey had been researching and sending out samples of progenitor to his colleagues, they fight various test subjects that are out and roaming free in the lab, and come across a huge facility that houses many pods, seemingly containing test subjects. Running over to a computer, it's evident this place is run by TRICELL too. Chris searches the computer for Jill's pod, and the elevator takes them down to where her pod is, but they are interrupted. Another BOW, this time a huge spider-like one named U8. After chucking a number of grenades into its gob, they defeat it and find Jill's pod. However, it's empty. Terragrigia comes up on screen and tells them to leave. She plays the fool when asked about Jill's whereabouts and reveals that she was the one who ordered the BSAA to withdraw from the area. Chris demands to know where Jill is, but she refuses to tell them anything. She advises them to leave, and that there's nothing there worth throwing their lives away over. Later on, after fighting through many infected militiamen, Chris and Sheva intercept a radio conversation between Wesker and Excella, where she says that Ouroboros has been loaded, and Chris is surprised because as far as he was concerned, Wesker was dead. Fighting more militia, they spot missiles with Ouroboros emblazoned across the side. Is this how they're planning on spreading this virus around the world? Even further on, they come across Excella in the flesh, where she unleashes a BOW on them. It's the Ouroboros virus. The rumours were true. But not to worry, there's a rather conveniently placed flamethrower nearby which they used to beat it. Pushing further on, they meet Excella, who is with the cloaked woman, and she attacks them. Chris shoots the mask off of her, and Wesker shows up, pulling back the woman's hood, and it's Jill. Well, who didn't see that one coming? Chris tries to talk to Jill, but she attacks him again. And in classic Wesker style, he claims he can only spare 7 minutes to fight them. With Wesker's abilities, Chris and Sheva must try and hide and survive for 7 minutes, as their bullets cannot hurt him. Eventually, Wesker gets bored and departs, leaving Jill to kill Chris and Sheva. It seems Jill is under the control of a contraption which leaves her highly open to manipulation by Wesker. Chris tries to reason with the part of her that knows him, and eventually they manage to remove the device controlling her. But let's break for a second and talk about Ouroboros. So what is it, exactly? Well, it all comes down to the night Wesker had killed Spencer, and found out that he was a subject in a eugenics program himself. Spencer had revealed that Umbrella was set up by him in the first place in order to create Ubermensch, a perfect race of humans that could take humanity forward. Wesker thought that humanity in its current form was the problem, so thought about using Progenitor against the entire world. Progenitor would kill those without the right genetics to accept it. This was seen in the ancient practices of the Endipaya, and all others would perish. Now when Jill threw herself at Wesker and the two didn't die, contrary to what Chris thought, a perfect test subject for this virus, something that Wesker called the Philosopher's Stone, Ouroboros. Only thing is, Jill had T-virus antibodies inside her, but he used these to create a less potent virus strain, which is Ouroboros. Thousands of subjects were kidnapped from all parts of the world and stored in TRICELL's huge facility until research was finalized on the virus. As we saw, it had been loaded onto missiles, ready to be dispersed around the planet. Unfortunately, though, a fire broke out where the first lot of missiles were being housed, and this resulted in a new species being birthed called Reapers. Now she's come to her senses, Jill tells Chris and Sheva that she couldn't control her actions, but that she was still fully aware, and apologizes. She says they need to stop Wesker, and not long afterwards they spot his ship. Making their way through the ship, which holds a large number of BOWs, they come across Excella, who, when confronted, runs off but drops a briefcase containing syringes. Catching up to her again, Chris and Sheva discover that Excella has been infected with the Ouroboros. Wesker did it. She's devastated as she thought her and Wesker would usher in his new world together. Excella then transforms into a huge BOW, and this is because the Ouroboros virus has rejected her. Mutant Excella is huge and requires a lot of firepower to bring down. After defeating Excella, Chris and Sheva spot an assault bomber in a hangar on the ship, and it's clear that Wesker is planning to use this thing to spread Ouroboros around the world. They spot him on the monitor and head off to stop him. Jill calls Chris and Sheva and reveals that in order to maintain his superhuman abilities, Wesker has to have regular doses of the serum. She reveals that injecting too much, i.e. an overdose, would effectively poison him. Sheva recalls the syringes that Excella dropped earlier on, as she has one of them, and a plan is formulated, and Chris and Sheva manage to confront Wesker.
Your plans are finished, Wesker.
There's no way out this time.
Don't you two ever tire of failing in your mission? You've really become quite an inconvenience for me.
What do you accomplish by unleashing Ouroboros?
Every day, humans come one step closer to self-destruction. I'm not destroying the world, I'm saving it.
This guy's lost it.
This may be our only chance.
Do it.
Things are really getting interesting now, eh, Chris? Do you actually think you can defeat me?
Either way, I'm not gonna stop until I'm dead.
Well then, I'll just have to kill you quickly.
Facing off against him, after Wesker catches rockets, because of course he can, Chris shoots the rocket, stunning him, and they restrain him, injecting the serum into him. Now overdosed and in incredible pain, Wesker boards the stealth bomber and Chris and Sheva scramble to get aboard before he's able to escape. As he takes off, Chris and Sheva are able to board it, and confronting Wesker again, he says that in 5 minutes they'll be at the optimal altitude to release Ouroboros into the atmosphere. A fight ensues and Chris injects Wesker with more serum. Chris pulls the bomber's override lever, causing the door to open, and the bomber then crash lands in a volcano. Wesker is of course still alive, and in an act of complete madness he punches through one of the Ouroboros missiles and the virus takes him over. After punching a huge rock into submission, him and Sheva work together to beat Wesker and defeat him with him falling into the lava, just as Josh and Jill arrive with a chopper to lift them out of the volcano. But in one predictable twist in the tale, Wesker isn't done. He emerges from the lava, preventing the chopper from leaving, and Chris and Sheva fire 2 rockets straight into Wesker, killing him for good, and the group leave. Chris realizes now that it is all worth fighting for. The following year, Jill went to rehab after what happened at the hands of Wesker, and Chris was promoted within the BSAA to captain of their Special Operations Unit and would train new BSAA recruits, such as a hotshot young sniper by the name of Pierce Nivens. In 2011, Claire Redfield is at a TerraSave event. TerraSave is an NGO that she now works for. TerraSave was formed after the destruction of Raccoon City along with the cover-up of the disaster by the government and large corporations, and they were dedicated to helping people affected by bioterrorism. TerraSave were brought in to help in the Kijuju Autonomous Zone as well, but this didn't exactly go to plan as they were chased by infected there. At TerraSave HQ, Claire speaks with one of the new young women who was working there called Moira Burton. She is the estranged daughter of Barry Burton, the former STARS member. One of their colleagues, Neil, wants to speak with her in private, and he tells her that something is going down in Washington regarding a new virus with links to TRICELL. Claire responds that TRICELL is history after what happened in Africa, but Neil is worried. His book reveals a list of names, but it's not clear what they reference, and Moira's name is on it. All of a sudden, the lights go out in the building, and armed individuals storm the place. One of them calls out Claire by name and tells her she's going with them. Both Moira and Claire are then knocked out and taken to a penal colony. Waking up in a cell with a strange wristband on, her cell then opens and taking a short walk, she is able to hear the voice of Moira. Speaking with her, it seems that someone is watching them on the monitors as her cell door opens. Moving further into the prison, they see hanging bodies everywhere and they are attacked by something horrible. Hearing someone else screaming, they investigate and find their colleague Gina has been attacked by another grotesque being, and she eventually succumbs to her injuries and passes away. Pushing on further, they spot a set of keys on a dead guard, but trying to grab them, his body falls down along with the keys, and needing to retrieve said keys, they descend and get to the guard, but the keys are gone. He does, however, have a gun on him, so that's a plus in a place like this. Moira shines the light around the room trying to get sight of where the keys may have ended up, and they've snagged on an old boiler. Shooting the keys down, they have now retrieved them, and now to get out of this place. Unfortunately, it won't be that easy as another monster, called Afflicted, bursts into the room, and Claire puts it down, but there are more to deal with. Claire offers Moira a weapon, but she refuses one as she's scared of guns. They eventually spot a young girl who runs off and they try to catch up with her. Entering into another wing of the prison, they hear a voice over an intercom, and Claire's wristband turns from green to amber. The person watching them asks if they're afraid, and she explains the bracelets change colour in response to fear. In a cell, they find a letter by someone written to their mother, which states that people there call the prisoners experiments and that they torture them every day. There are loads of afflicted in this place. Are these the former prisoners? After a chaotic battle against waves of afflicted, as all the cells are opened, Claire and Moira are able to get outside and find they're in some sort of forest. The mysterious woman calls again, telling Claire that she is the Overseer. A bit further on, Claire and Moira spot a radio tower, and Claire thinks they may be able to send an SOS. Using the console there, unfortunately it's dead, and climbing the radio tower itself, Claire powers it up from there and Moira tries to call for help, stating her name and that she and her co-workers had been taken there against their will. She mentions the bracelets, the Overseer, and the monsters, and she begs anyone that is listening to send help. But as Claire looks out, she realises that they're miles from anywhere, on an island. Sometime later, Neil Fisher and two men who were also abducted from the TerraSave party called Gabriel and Pedro are running away from some afflicted. Neil fires on the afflicted and splits off from the other two, who soon arrive at a small pub in a fishing village. Pedro places the bloodied bracelet of one of their group, Edward, onto the table, stating that he's going to examine it. They hear sounds outside, and Gabriel attacks the person walking in, thinking it's another afflicted, and he is swiftly disarmed. It's revealed to be Claire, who is with Moira. Pedro accidentally activates the jukebox, and they'll have a good laugh about it. The power then comes on, and Gabriel tells Claire and Moira they woke up in the middle of the woods, and Claire tells him they woke up in the prison. Searching the building, the Overseer makes contact, and welcomes them all to the brink of true fear. She says that she needs to throw them all at the wall and see who sticks. She explains that this metaphorical wall is a virus that she injected into all of them. Gabriel states that he's not a lab rat and she can stick it up her ass. Gabriel requests Claire to go with him, saying that he wants to show her something. He found a chopper there, but it needs some repair work doing to it as it doesn't have enough voltage to fly at the moment and needs a battery and fuel. Searching the town with Moira, she and Claire have to do this whilst contending with lots more of the afflicted. Having found both the battery and the fuel, they return to Gabriel, and he says he'll get to work on fixing it. A loud siren starts to sound in the fishing village, and Claire knows that this is the Overseer's doing. She's trying to lure the afflicted right to them in the village. Claire and Moira need to kill the siren quickly, so making their way back into the pub, they're able to do it. They find that Pedro is freaking out, and since the bracelets are linked to fear, and he is terrified, his turns red. Fighting and surviving the afflicted assault on the pub, Pedro starts to mutate, with the virus in him causing him to mutate. So Claire must now take her friend and colleague down. Eventually Neil arrives and saves the day, knocking down a ladder and helping them out, and they get out of there escaping the afflicted. Claire asks him about Gabriel, but he responds that Gabriel is ex-military, so he'll be fine. Moving through a long dark tunnel, they emerge and spot a very tall and odd-looking tower in the distance. Claire thinks that the Overseer may be inside, but Neil thinks this is a bad idea and they should wait until dawn, but time is not a luxury they have, not with these bracelets on. Making the decision to head for the tower, Claire and Moira get separated from Neil after they climb a ladder, as he has to run away from a group of afflicted. Pushing on without Neil, Claire and Moira spot the young girl from the prison again, and Moira points out that she has the same bracelet on as them. Claire finds a document in a building which mentions the bracelets, and it details a mock test where 11 candidates were subjected to emotional distress over a period of time. 3 died straight away and the other 8 mutated and were disposed of. The document mentions that none of them were able to overcome their fear. Another document mentions the island being called Zabitij, and at some point, someone had turned up with equipment and provided a whole load of employment opportunities. People, like the person writing this note, were very thankful for this person. Some doubted her, much to the frustration of some. Could they be talking about the Overseer? Moving through an apartment block, a note is there written by a town resident who says that her husband hadn't returned home after going to the monument, so she went there. She says that she was given what they called a preventative shot and a bracelet that they said would help to protect her. She complained of feeling dizzy and found part of her husband, but acted like finding his head was no big deal. They spot the young girl again and she disappears through a door. Claire tells the girl not to be scared, but Claire's directness is a bit too much for the girl, so Moira takes over and asks about the girl's teddy, which she says is called Lottie. The girl takes Moira's hand and they push on, but hear the sound of more afflicted. Sure enough, the dining hall is full of them. Telling the girl to stay where she is, they battle the afflicted, which includes a massive one, and they triumph. Now outside, the young girl says that she got her teddy bear from a guy from TerraSave, and that the man saved her when she was little. Now at the base of the tower, they spot a chopper, and it's Gabriel who managed to fix it. Unfortunately, their joy turns to horror as the chopper's controls malfunction and the Overseer accuses Gabriel of cheating. It's very likely she rigged the chopper as a trap. With his panic and fear taking over, his bracelet starts to flash, and he mutates, furiously stabbing at his hand with a knife to try and cut it off to prevent turning. With Claire and Moira distracted by what's going on in the sky, they fail to notice the young girl getting taken by someone. The chopper crashes into a building, explodes, and Gabriel is dead. The two of them notice that the girl is gone. With no sign of the girl, Claire says she may have taken cover, so she can look for her as they go. They find a note from Neil shortly after, which is telling any survivors to go to a factory called the Keerling. In a large open area, though, they are locked in by the Overseer, who says that this is the Keerling and claims that this is where all things come to an end. On a statue of Prometheus, they find Neil's TerraSave ID card, and the Overseer states that Prometheus was bound to a rock for stealing someone's divine power. She says that if Claire wants to see Neil again, she'll have to brave, as she puts it, the scaffold of the gods. Entering and searching the 2 buildings in the area, the abattoir and the processing plant, as well as fighting numerous afflicted, as was to be expected, obtain 2 organs to place inside the Prometheus statue. Placing them in the statue, it explodes, and the door behind it leads to a wine cellar. Once again, the Overseer locks the door behind them. The place starts falling apart and is now on fire, with the Overseer saying that she's done with them, and they're being removed from the experiment. She says that the god's scaffold has served its purpose, and now Promethean fire will devour everything. Despite the Overseer's traps, Claire and Moira are able to escape the raging inferno and jump into some water below as the building explodes. Grateful to be alive, they realise they're in the waterway, which itself leads to the tower. Claire says that hopefully the Overseer thinks they died in the explosion, so they won't be bothered by her anymore. Finding a locked gate, they encounter an old man called Evgeny. He's a prickly old character and asks what they want. Claire notices he doesn't have a bracelet on, and telling him he should get out of there, he says he refuses to leave his home. He opens the gate for them, though, so that's nice. As expected, these sewers are teeming with afflicted too. After an exhausting jaunt through the sewers, Claire and Moira find a document amongst a bunch of graves which speaks of Master Alex, and that she calls this island number 46. It says that she is pursuing her goal of rebirth. Is Alex Wesker involved with what's going on here? Emerging on the surface again, they are at the base of the tower. What Claire isn't ready for is what she finds in here. To start, she finds a hanged man in an office, and checking a document next to him, seems the man is called Stuart. He writes that Alex had a vision of the future. It seems that she believed the world needed order. She must have had a lot of charisma as well, as her researchers believed that they needed to atone for their sins. Another note written by Alex mentions samples arriving from Africa, something with a very high infection rate, and it mentions another Wesker. Could she be talking about Ouroboros and Albert here? The name of a virus is mentioned, T-Phobos. Is this the virus activated by fear? Turns out from another note found in the tower that T-Phobos came about by reducing the lethality of the T-virus, and it was engineered to be triggered by fear. But the most shocking thing is still to come. Moira tells Claire that she'd noticed something about Neil, that his bracelet never changed colour. Either Neil has balls of steel, or there's something going on here. Checking one of the offices here, Claire finds a book with TerraSave written on the front. She recognises a list as one Neil had at the party back at TerraSave HQ. It's a list of their names, including Gabriel and Pedro. Neil had looked at all these people's psych evaluations, and each and every one of them had come into contact with and had experiences with bioterror and viruses. Well, everyone but Moira. This includes the young girl Claire and Moira found, revealed to be called Natalia, who was 3 years old and was in Terragrigia when the Ilveltro attacks happened. This explains how she got the teddy bear from the TerraSave agent, who is Neil himself. Claire is furious as she believes Neil has sold TerraSave out. He'd sent these names directly to Alex, the overseer, who arranged to have them all abducted from TerraSave HQ. They spot Neil on a monitor. He is approached by a woman in white, presumably Alex Wesker, the overseer. He says he's isolated the two most promising subjects, which are Claire and Moira. He tells her it's her turn to fulfill her end of the deal, but she shoots him with something. She shot him with the Ouroboros virus, calling him her lapdog. She reveals that Neil was working for Morgan Lansdale. Turns out that Lansdale, before he got arrested, passed the torch onto someone else. Neil always believed that Lansdale did the right thing when it came to Terragrigia, as he believed it was for the greater good. The feed then cuts out with Neil struggling and in pain. Claire is upset but brushes this off, as they still need to ascend the tower. On approaching the elevator, Neil emerges from it, not yet mutated. He falls to the ground and he says that he did what he thought was right. Claire quickly corrects him, saying that it was not the right thing to do. He then starts to violently convulse, saying that he wanted to bring the FBC back, and mutates whilst begging Claire to get away from him. Now no longer in control of himself, Neil attacks Claire and Moira, and she must now defeat him. She does, bringing down the man she thought was her friend. Getting back on the elevator again, Mutant Neil is not done yet and he pins Moira. Claire saves her, but they both fall down to the ground with Neil. With Claire now being pinned by him, she reaches for a gun. With it just out of reach, Moira, who is scared to death of guns, overcomes her fear and shoots Neil. With Neil now officially dead, Overseer Alex is watching on a monitor. She says she has what she needs and walks over to Natalia, who is unconscious and hooked up to machines. Alex says they will become good friends who will know each other inside out. Alex places Natalia into a life support chamber and starts coughing. She says that 6 months from now, Natalia is going to awaken as Alex. Yet Alex is going to transfer her consciousness into Natalia. This is her rebirth that we found out about earlier on. She walks off saying the world is going to be very afraid and sends Natalia down to the depths of the tower. But why her? What makes her so special? Meanwhile, Claire and Moira have ascended the tower via the elevator. They come across the control center where Alex has been keeping a very close eye on her subjects. A bit further on, they discover a journal entry written by Alex about Oswell E. Spencer. She calls him a poor, pathetic old man. She says that the body will age, and that is inescapable, but that she had found a way to transfer her mind into another vessel. This is what she had put all of her efforts into. She wanted to ascend to godhood herself. The criteria for a successful vessel must be mentally strong and be able to overcome fear. And after the transfer, it takes 6 months for the transferred mind to stabilize. That the vessel, who of course is Natalia, must be protected at all costs. They all find a report from Neil who stated that Natalia was the perfect vessel because she is incapable of feeling fear. I guess surviving the Terragrigia Panic at 3 years old and seeing the bioweapons and monsters up close made her immune to fear. All across the island, Claire had been able to find excerpts of literature by Franz Kafka, and it appears that Alex had taken huge inspiration from Kafka in regard to his experiment, but they were able to confront Alex, who's behind a screen.
You came all this way just to say goodbye? Oh, I'm touched. It's already done. I've conquered fear and earned the right to become a god.
Come out from behind that glass so I can choke a god.
All that remains is one final test. One last threshold to cross.
Is she even listening to us?
My brother's escape was death. And soon, it will be mine as well. I will share in his fate, and then I will surpass him.
What are you trying to do?
Escape.
Just like that.
With the death of Alex Wesker, this triggers the tower's self-destruct sequence, so Claire and Moira need to get out of there. During their escape though, Claire is in danger of being crushed by a slab of concrete, and Moira pushes her out of the way but gets pinned herself. With the tower still crumbling, Moira begs Claire to just go, and she jumps from the tower, landing in the water below. Sometime later, Claire is found floating in the sea and was rushed to hospital. Drifting in and out of consciousness, she sees Barry Burton, Moira's father, there, but she apologizes to him, saying that she tried to save her. Barry is now working for the BSAA, and Claire relayed information to them in regard to what had happened. But they were having some trouble locating the island. So Moira wakes up, and she was rescued by the old man who lives in the sewers, Evgeny, and although he didn't want to save her, he did so, and he allowed her to live there with him, but only if she lived by his rules. Evgeny sees no point in trying to escape the island and has told Moira that she needs to, as he puts it, face reality. He would teach Moira to hunt for food, how to survive, and over the next 6 months they did survive. But one day, Moira tried to find a way off the island, as she, despite being estranged from him, missed her dad, and she'd had a dream that he was dying. Well, this didn't work, as Moira had inadvertently led a number of afflicted back to the sewers, where Evgeny was living, and they had to fight them and kill them all. They also encountered a problem where new mutants, named Revenants, were killing the wildlife on the island, which meant that Moira and Evgeny's food supply was at risk. Searching the small fishing village, they find supplies, and in them a document which had a list of people taken to the mines for experimentation. Evgeny's daughter, Irina, was on that list, so she and the old man journey out to the mines. Fighting more and more afflicted, they find a letter, and on it are the last words of Irina. Evgeny finally came to the realization and accepted that Irina was gone. But this caused Evgeny to accept that his life was over, as he had nothing to live for, so he locked himself in the room next door in the sewers, and he would spend his last moments alone. Moira would become inspired to survive though, and wanted to see her father again. 6 months after she had been sent to the bottom of the tower, Natalia is dreaming about a conversation with her teddy bear Lottie. She then wakes up from her long sleep. Confused as to where exactly she is, she calls out for Lottie. Another of herself, dressed in black, asks her what's the matter, and seems to mock her. She says that this Natalia looks like her, and the one in the black dress, let's call her Dark Natalia, says that she is her. Dark Natalia holds up a postcard from Lottie and gives it to her. Lottie wants to know why Natalia left her behind, and wonders if she even loves her anymore. Moving through the sewers, the town and the forest, Dark Natalia constantly asks Natalia to stop looking for Lottie and just let her take over, but Natalia refuses to let her. Natalia eventually finds Lottie, and this was all revealed to be a trap, as Dark Natalia is Alex Wesker's consciousness trying to take over. It doesn't work, as both Lottie and Dark Natalia vanish, and approaching on a boat is Barry Burton. The BSAA found the island, and Barry has gone there by himself to try and find out where Moira is and what happened to her. So Barry needs to go and investigate the island and tells Natalia to stay with the boat, but she says that he can't just leave her there. Eventually she twists his arm, and he tells her to stay close to him. Making their way up to the radio tower, Barry gets his first look at the monsters inhabiting this island, which after 6 months are a bit decomposed. The wonders of the T-Vobus virus, I guess. On the way through some buildings, Natalia states that she can see the monsters. Natalia says that she's not scared, much to the surprise of Barry. Having passed through the detention center, Barry notes that some of the infected seem to have the same mutations that Ouroboros produces. Finally getting to the radio tower, Barry hears Moira's voice from the distress call she'd put out 6 months earlier. Moira mentions that they were going to head over to the Vosek, which is the pub. Natalia remembers the name, Moira, and her head starts to hurt. Natalia then tells Barry that Moira is dead. Natalia points to the tower and tells Barry that Moira was trying to get to it when she was with her and Claire. Barry refuses to believe that Moira is dead, and he asks if Natalia can take him to the tower, and she says that she can. So they set off, and on the way find the body of Edward Thompson, one of the TerraSave employees. They eventually arrive at the Vosek, and they encounter invisible monsters there, but Natalia is a big help as she can see them. Passing through the fishing village, they're able to spot the tower, and not long after, Natalia begins to hear a deep guttural voice, telling her that she's been waiting for her. Barry asks her what's wrong, but she says she's fine. They also come across the crashed and burnt out chopper that Gabriel was flying, and Barry has to dislodge it from the building to proceed. Then they are attacked, and have to deal with mutated Pedro, who, armed with his drill, is a very dangerous infected. Dealing with him and descending onto the street, they finally get inside the tower where they find writing on the walls bearing Natalia's name, and it's clear that whoever wrote it hates her and wants to kill her. Moving through a bunch of creepy dolls in one of the rooms here, they find a portrait of Alex Wesker and Albert Wesker. Barry is slightly shocked to discover that there was more than one Wesker. They hear an evil laugh coming from above them. The same voice that Natalia heard before says that they finally came and that they knew they would. A monster then attacks Barry and disarms him. It then points straight at Natalia, saying her name, and Natalia's eyes widen. The monster removes its mask and Natalia says that this is Alex Wesker. Barry demands to know where Moira is, but she replies that she had buried Moira beneath the mountain of fear and despair. They then get surrounded by revenants and other monstrosities, so Barry tells Alex he'll kill her later, and he brings down a load of concrete on top of the monsters, and he and Natalia escape through a side door. Natalia claims she's unable to walk, so Barry carries her until she has regained her strength, and he explains why Moira was so scared of guns. Moira had a younger sister, and when Moira and she were little, playing in the house, they'd found Barry's guns which he'd forgotten to lock away, and Moira accidentally shot and killed her sister. After sharing this story, they work their way through the sewers which are now drained, and at the end, they find the remains of Evgeny. Barry also finds Moira's phone there, and it has voice messages on it from when she was pinned under the rubble, of Moira telling her family she loves them and that she's sorry for being a bad daughter. Making their way through the rest of the sewers, they come to the large mine where Moira and Evgeny have found his daughter Irina's last unwritten words. What they find around the mines, including Irina's last words, suggest that Alex Wesker had conducted experiments with the T-Phobos virus here. Her last words also tell us that Evgeny did not trust Alex Wesker from the moment she'd arrived on the island. Fighting all manner of creatures and monsters here, they get through to the other side of the mine, but are surprised by Alex, who knocks Barry off of a cliff and tells Natalia that it shouldn't be like this. Alex asks herself why Natalia isn't changing like she did. She begins to strangle Natalia and she goes limp, but Natalia's eyes then open, causing Alex to recoil. For some reason, she's absolutely terrified and she screams. Coming to after being knocked out, Barry calls out for Moira. He sees Natalia standing there and asks if she's okay. It seems that Alex fled. Asking where Wesker is, Natalia responds that she went somewhere else. Natalia thinks that she's on the other side of the mountain, so they both make a move to head back up the cliff again. Making their way through the water treatment plant and the gas-filled mines, they discover a mansion which itself has a laboratory underneath it. This must be where Alex's team of researchers have been working on the T-Phobos virus. Seems that Barry's hunch about the creatures showing similarities to Ouroboros was spot on, as a researcher wrote in their journal that they'd introduced the Ouroboros virus to corpses, and the corpses would indeed reanimate, moving like marionettes. Proceeding through the lab through use of keycards, Barry and Natalia come across Lottie, and it's been torn apart and nailed to a wall. Alex's journal sits in front of it, and it speaks of Alex's hatred for Natalia. Basically, when she'd shot herself, she didn't die, and she became mutated by T-Phobos. She has it in her head that although she is grotesque, the new vessel with her consciousness inside it is the ugly one, hence why she's been doing everything she can in order to kill Natalia. Alex says that there can only be one true her, that Natalia is false. She vowed to smother the island with Ouroboros. Coming face to face with Alex, she injects herself with Ouroboros, and as expected, this causes her to mutate again. Barry fights Alex and does his best to protect Natalia from her. But at some point, Alex grabs Natalia and attempts to kill her, with Barry watching on in despair, but who should show up? Moira, and she unloads her gun into Alex. Barry looks over to see who saved them and is shocked to see his daughter. As expected, Alex is not dead yet, and the three of them escape out onto the cliff's edge. They are trapped at one point, but a chopper shows up with Claire in it. Moira and Natalia get onto the chopper, but Barry says he needs to finish Alex off. So he leads around the caves, and Claire provides fire support from the chopper. Claire is able to finally take aim with an RPG, hitting her in the chest, and she is finally killed. Barry gets back onto the chopper and they fly away from the island with a bunch of choppers heading over to it to perform a sterilization operation. Sometime later, Claire visits the Burton residence and is on the phone with Piers Nivans. There's been an outbreak of a new virus being called the C virus. In the living room, Natalia, who's been adopted by the Burton family now, is sat reading Kafka, but she then smiles an evil smile, indicating that Alex Wesker's consciousness has taken over Natalia's body. That same year, Leon Kennedy, who was enjoying his vacation, has been sent to the Eastern Slav Republic. Leon is now part of the US government's newly formed Department of Security Operations, or DSO for short. It's described as the sword of the president and recruits only the best US government agents from various departments. It's basically the successor to the FBC. Anyway, there's a civil war going on inside the Eastern Slav Republic, as ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union, various states have been declaring themselves independent states, and the Eastern Slav Republic wanted to follow suit. The country moved to a capitalist form of government, and many weren't happy as the president's cabinet were pretty much made up of elites. Billionaires who had got themselves nice and rich, and oligarchy was rising as was the gap between rich and poor. The inevitable happened, and the working class citizens of the country started an uprising, taking over parts of the country. There was a ceasefire under a new president, Svetlana Belikova, but this did not last as the rebel fighters were sat on land that was oil-rich, so the Eastern Slav army started taking that which the president wanted, calling it an anti-terrorism operation. This led to the rebels becoming a lot more extreme and desperate. Unfortunately, and the reason Leon Kennedy is there, is that there have been bioweapons used in this civil war. Leon makes contact with Hunnigan, who immediately tells him that his mission has been aborted and needs to get out of there, as the government here and the US government have decided to part ways. But he's reluctant to leave and is annoyed at the US government's abandoning of this mission. He goes radio silent and decides to disregard his orders, staying to investigate. He heads to an underground car park where he's to meet with a CIA contact codenamed Scarecrow. He finds the man badly wounded and mentions the word beekeeper. Leon recalls a truck he'd passed on the way here with a honeybee on it. They're then attacked by a licker. The CIA agent is killed, and Leon engages the licker in battle. He is eventually knocked down and is about to be killed by the licker when it stops. It seems that an elderly man is actually commanding the licker, and Leon passes out. When he wakes up, he's in the basement of a house somewhere and is being searched by the Eastern Slav army. The guys who have him are some of the rebels, and the old guy sat in the corner is the rebel leader, Ivan Judanovich, who they call Ataman. Two others there are JD, who stole Leon's body armor, and Alexander Kozachenko, nicknamed Buddy, and Ivan starts to convulse and Leon tells JD to keep a close eye on him. The soldiers eventually realize that there's someone underneath this house and begin firing, and they all escape, but Ivan is shot by Buddy as he's turning. Leon, who has escaped the group at this point, follows JD and he realizes the parasites being used here are the Plaga, same ones as in Spain. Going with JD to a church, Leon tells him that the townsfolk here are being controlled by a parasite that attaches itself to the central nervous system via the spinal cord, the Plaga. Buddy walks in with two rebels and tells Leon he has more questions for him. Buddy is talking with JD and he says that he needs to go and get something, as someone needs to take over from Ivan. He speaks of an attack on the presidential palace, which is only a few miles away, and he tells JD to get ready. JD, worried about what Buddy is about to do, takes Leon outside and frees him, telling him that the Plaga was given to the rebels by the elders who have authority over the rebels. Leon has realized that the rebels are injecting the parasites into their body so they can control the lickers. JD wants Leon to stop Buddy from doing what he's planning to do, so he hands Leon back his weapon, and Leon goes off to stop Buddy, who by this point has already gotten his hands on what he needed. Meanwhile, President Belikova has brought in Ada Wong, who bizarrely claims that she's from the BSAA and she's there to inform the people in Belikova's government about the Plaga parasite. A little later she meets Leon whilst he was out trying to stop Buddy, and she says that the Plagas the rebels are using are defective, but says that she's just there to lend a hand, saying that if the rebels attack the presidential palace, it'll make her job a lot easier. And in classic Ada fashion, she's off again. Leon hears the church bells ringing and the president is on the phone telling one of her generals to begin their attack. When Leon gets to the church, he finds zombies clambering outside to get in. Speaking with JD, he has survived a zombie attack in the church, and Leon says they need to leave as the military are going to firebomb the area. However, Buddy enters the church and JD begins to turn. He goes for Buddy, so Leon shoots his legs. JD's Plaga erupts and Leon kills him. After, Leon asks Buddy to give him the Plaga. As the military begin to bomb the area, Buddy says he believes there's no difference between what the military are doing now and using the BOWs. Later on, 3 of the trucks with the honeybee on the side show up at the presidential palace and the lickers attack. Around the same time, Ada's whole BSAA ruse fails when President Belikova, who is a badass in her own right, rumbles her. Her office acts as a large elevator, and she detains Ada, taking her far down underneath the presidential palace. A short while after that, Leon arrives at the palace and finds it a mess, with the military's dead strewn everywhere. Leon is able to make his way down to the underground facility where the president took Ada, and he speaks with her. They comment on how this place looks like a beehive, and inside each small pod is a Plaga. Ada reveals this is the first time dominant Plagas have been engineered. Ada starts to mess with the terminal there, and Leon gets a bit worried as to what she's been up to. The president and her security forces show up, and Ada causes a blackout. Leon kicks off a gunfight, and in the confusion, Leon is able to take the president at gunpoint. The elevator begins to sound, and out of it come a bunch of lickers being controlled via Buddy and the Plaga parasite inside him. He sets a licker on Leon, but he defeats it, and going after Buddy, he runs alongside a pack of lickers and they run straight for the president, but she is behind some bulletproof glass. He calls her a pretender to the throne, and she says that all the elders have gone over to her side. So basically, the elder council members had been bought. The government had promised them a share of revenues from the sale of oil from their land, and all of them accepted apart from Ivan, who carried on leading the rebels in their fight. Prior to this though, they were provided bioweapons by a company called Yuri, and they were dominant Plaga parasites, bioengineered by scientists working for President Belikova to be defective since the host would eventually regress into a subordinate. The company Yuri itself was actually a shell company owned by President Belikova. The base plagas they bioengineered were actually the ones formerly developed by TRICELL and were the Type 2 and 3s. The ones they had engineered were called Type 4. This was a ploy by the president in order to destroy the rebel group from within, to paint them as bioterrorists and to obtain international support. Hearing of the Elder's betrayal is tough for Buddy to take, but it's about to get worse as the president releases a tyrant. Yep, she's got a few of those too, and this tyrant, a T-103, much like the tyrant bodyguards of Sergei Vladimir but modified, pursues them. What's more is that the president has activated the incineration of the facility as well, so they need to leave. Ada helps Leon out with the elevator, and Buddy, who has now come to his senses, enters with him. Two tyrants try to get onto the lift, but their weight sends it crashing down to the depths, whilst Leon and Buddy manage to get through the service hatch. Having to fight the tyrants outside, Buddy uses a liquor to lure a tyrant over to a fuel truck. Shooting it blows the tyrant up, but it emerges from the flames as a super tyrant now since its power limiter has been destroyed, which is a device that prevents tyrants from mutating further. After killing the tyrant with a tank, more join the party, and Leon and Buddy have to run for it whilst being chased. Meanwhile, the president is busy practicing her victory speech, declaring that the Elder Council and her government had come to an agreement, therefore her country should be accepted into the international community. Her chief of staff talks with her and tells her that all the elders are dead. She proposes telling the world that the rebels executed the elders as traitors. In regard to Ada Wong impersonating a BSAA agent, the president's chief of staff says that an international warrant is out for her arrest, after they informed the BSAA of the damage Ada had done. With Leon and Buddy out of options and with two tyrants walking towards them, Leon prepares to fight them, but the tyrants get absolutely shredded by two aircraft. It seems that Leon, being a very close friend of the current president, Adam Benford, the US has been monitoring Leon on his mission. The president begins her press conference, but her chief of staff runs in and tells her they are under attack by the US and Russia, and President Belikova has been outed as the leader of a terrorist state. Her government is about to be overthrown. Buddy, who is succumbing to his infection, asks Leon to kill him before he turns. Stopping him from shooting himself, Leon tells him that he needs to go on living to honour the people that died. He shoots, but this serves as a way to sever the parasite from Buddy's spinal cord, but this does mean Buddy is now paralysed. Afterwards, Leon is having a well-earned drink, and Hunnigan calls, saying that a temporary government will be set up in the Eastern Slav Republic, and that Svetlana Belikova resigned from the presidency and any companies that supported her are to be dismantled and thrown out of the country. Buddy, meanwhile, is in his wheelchair and kids around him seem happy, as is Buddy himself, as before the Civil War, he was a teacher. Ada is revealed to have retrieved one of the defective Type 4 Plaga parasites, which explains what she was doing on the computer in the beehive. She is talking with a mystery man and seems to enjoy the fact that she has an international warrant out for her arrest. It's now December 2012. A mercenary named Jake Muller is in war-torn Eastern European state, Edonia. The country, like the Eastern Slav Republic, is in the throes of a civil war which was being fought between the pro- and anti-government factions in the country's military, but is now being fought between the country's military and the Edonian Liberation Army. Jake is one of many mercenaries who are guns for hire for the rebels. He takes a shot of something which seems to have no effect on him, but the Edonian rebels he's with take the same shot and turn into violent hostile creatures called Juavo, and one of them attacks Jake. After dealing with it, he is approached by a DSO agent from the US government, or more specifically one of their agents called Sherry Birkin. Yep, the same Sherry Birkin from the Raccoon City incident over a decade earlier. Upon their escape, they seem to have been watched by Ada Wong, and they have to escape a battlefield in which the BSAA are engaging any Juavo they see. When safe, Sherry informs Jake that his blood contains rare antibodies that could be used in an antidote for a virus called the C virus. Of course, with Jake being a mercenary, he requests $50 million in exchange for his blood, to which the DSO agrees, much to Jake's surprise. After escaping, they are hunted by a massive creature called Ustanak, and they once again manage to escape after defeating it. They run into a BSAA squad led by Chris Redfield, whose team had been dispatched to Edonia to investigate the presence of Juavo in the region. Piers identifies Jake as a wanted insurgent, and Chris takes a long look at him. After taking out some anti-aircraft guns and fighting a massive BOW, Chris once again thinks he knows Jake, thinks they've met before. The BSAA and Jake and Sherry part ways and take off in a helicopter which will take them to the DSO. During Jake and Sherry's journey, the BSAA team led by Chris arrive at City Hall. They encounter what appear to be cocooned BOWs, and fight various other BOWs throughout the building. They see a woman in a blue dress. It's Ada Wong. She informs them that the Juavo came from the C virus and have been supplied to the rebels fighting in the Civil War by a company named Neo Umbrella, who she claims are an organization that are supporting the rebels in the Civil War. The C virus, or chrysalid virus, is something Chris and Pierce have encountered before when on mission in Asia during an outbreak at a school in Kudankan. Chris offers to escort Ada through the building, but she traps them by separating Chris and Pierce from the other 4 squad members. She unleashes a needle bomb into the air loaded with the C virus, and Chris and Pierce can only watch on as their fellow men mutate into chrysalids and then into creatures called napads, the large BOW that they just fought. One of their squad mates, Finn, who is now mutated into a napad, attacks Chris, beating him to the point where he starts to lose consciousness. Nonetheless, Pierce manages to drag him to safety. Meanwhile, Jake and Sherry are on their way to meet with the DSO, but they are attacked by the Ustanak and a hostile group called the Family. They defeat Ustanak, but the helicopter crash lands. Fortunately, Jake and Sherry manage to use a parachute to land safely. However, due to the debris from the helicopters flying by them, Sherry is injured. Jake pulls an object from her body, and it's revealed that Sherry has incredible regenerative abilities. Because she was infected with Golgotha by her father back in Raccoon City in 1998, Sherry has a G-virus variant inside her body. Jake and Sherry have lost 3 drives containing Jake's biometric data, and without that they are hosed as they can't make a vaccine. So after retrieving the 3 drives, they take shelter from a snowstorm inside a shack. Their shelter doesn't last for long though, as they are attacked by Joavo. Jake and Sherry use 2 nearby snowmobiles to make a swift exit and to escape a deadly avalanche. They end up inside a nearby mine and, yep, they are being hunted by Ustanak again. Again, Jake and Sherry escape the mine, but just as they exit, they are captured by the Family, and Ada Wong, who refers to Jake as Wesker Jr., telling Jake that Albert Wesker was his father, which is news to Jake. She says this makes him the heir to a very special blood type. What on earth is Ada Wong up to? Anyway, 6 months have now passed since Jake and Sherry's capture. Our focus shifts to Leon Kennedy. On 29th of June 2013, President Benford had scheduled a speech on the fight against terrorism at the Ivy University in a United States city called Tall Oaks. It didn't exactly go to plan as an outbreak occurred. President Benford was infected with the C virus and Leon has to put him down. Also present during this incident is United States Secret Service agent Helena Harper. Helena appears to say that this is all her fault and that she did this. Leon tries to get more information out of her, but Helena says that if they can get to the Tall Oaks Cathedral, she'll explain everything. They both make their way through the campus, and the outbreak is out of control. Thousands are infected. Leon and Helena come across a group of survivors holding out at a gun shop, whilst they wait for a fellow survivor to arrive with a bus to take them out of the city and to safety. After a tense fight with the infected, they manage to board it and drive out of the city. Contacting his handler, Hunnigan, she mentions that Neo Umbrella have claimed responsibility for the attack on Tall Oaks, to which Leon replies, it's Raccoon City all over again. Hunnigan says she needs to know what's in the cathedral, as the National Security Advisor to President Benford, Derek Simmons, is there with Hunnigan and wants updates. The bus ride is going well. That is until an infected walks out in the middle of the road, causing the bus to swerve and balance precariously on a cliff edge. Survivors are attacked and the bus is rammed off the cliff by a speeding and out-of-control truck. Miraculously, Leon and Helena are the sole survivors of this incident, and in a massive stroke of luck, they are at the intended destination, the cemetery of the Tall Oaks Cathedral. They get through it, and after arriving in front of the cathedral, they fight creatures and are eventually let in by more survivors. Leon and Helena discover a secret entrance built into the altar, leading down into a sort of crypt. There isn't just lots of dust and rats down there, there's something called a Lepotica, a creature with pores on its body which emit a blue gas containing the C virus. Inhale it and you turn, as this poor dude finds out.
What is that thing?
You're asking me?
Are you okay?
Anyway, after defeating this disgusting creature, Leon and Helena uncover an underground lab beneath the cathedral. The lab contains chrysalids and more infected. Helena states that she was there 3 days ago, and that these subjects weren't there then. Leon discovers a tape labelled Happy Birthday Ada Wong, and given his knowledge of her, he is curious and plays the tape. It shows something called Project Ada, and a cocoon hatching, and out of this cocoon comes Ada Wong. Leon is understandably confused. After more battles against the infected, Leon and Helena push on through the lab, escaping through a chute, and further underground into a series of tunnels. In a large open area, Helena finds what she was looking for, her sister Deborah. Deborah isn't in great shape, so Helena carries her. After descending, Deborah begins to cry out and she turns into a chrysalid. She then hatches into, well, a naked woman. A bolt flies out of nowhere and strikes Deborah, and it's Ada, who tells them she can't tell them what's going on as it's complicated. Deborah then mutates further and attacks the group. Deborah is about to kill Helena, who is saved by Leon and Ada, and Deborah ends up falling to her death. Helena reveals that 3 days earlier, she and Deborah were captured by none other than Derek Simmons, the National Security Advisor. Helena reveals that she helped Simmons breach President Benford's security at the university, and that explains why Helena said that the outbreak and the death of the president was all her fault. Simmons had used her sister as leverage. Ada receives a call and she makes a swift exit. Leon calls Hunnigan to warn her about Simmons, but he takes over the call on her end. He frames Leon and Helena for the death of the president and the attack on the university, and uses his position of power to deny his involvement. Leon and Helena push on through some catacombs and meet another BOW. This time a sort of shark-like BOW. Eventually defeating it, Leon and Helena escape the catacombs and see the city of Tall Oaks being sterilized, just like Raccoon City was back in '98. They receive a call from Hunnigan, who informs them that Simmons has left and is heading for Langshan in China. Alright, so what happened to Jake and Sherry then? Well, after they were taken by the family 6 months earlier, they were taken to a secret facility in China where Jake was experimented on. Being escorted by 2 of the Juavo mutants, Jake attacks them and escapes his confinement, eventually meeting up with Sherry. Jake says they were trying to use his antibodies to enhance the C virus, and they asked him about Albert Wesker. Sherry then contacts the DSO, finding out that Simmons travelled to Langshan. Anyway, after intense fighting and taking out loads of Juavo, Jake and Sherry use a bike to escape the compound and they head towards Langshan. But back to Eastern Europe again, Chris Redfield is drunk in a bar. You see, when Chris was attacked back at the City Hall in Adonia, he was beaten so badly that he suffered amnesia. He basically left the BSAA, but an old friend has been there watching him. It's Piers Nivens, but Chris doesn't remember him. After a minor confrontation with a local, it seems that Chris hasn't forgotten his training. Piers sits him down and tells him about bioterrorism and about their squad that died back in Adonia, which seems to trigger some painful flashbacks. Piers tells him that they've been looking for him for 6 months and that everyone is waiting for him to come back. Turns out that most of the people in the bar are with Piers in the BSAA, and they take Chris back to the BSAA, and on June 30th, 2013, he joins them in their mission in Weiyip, Lanshan, where another Neo-Umbrella bioterror attack has just taken place. Chris and Piers also come face to face with the Juavo again, and they have to fight through the streets in order to reach a building known to them as the Ace of Spades, where some members of the UN are being held hostage. They free the UN members, but due to a BSAA airstrike, the team has to scramble to get out of the building before it's destroyed. Chris sees a load of chrysalids, and this triggers more memories to come back. He remembers that Ada killed his men and vows to get revenge. At this point, Jake and Sherry, still heading towards Weiyip, are being pursued by an attack helicopter. They jump a wall and crash their bike, and the BSAA see Jake and Sherry and help them in taking down the attacking helicopter. Chris once again stares intently at Jake as if he recognizes him, and Jake and Sherry leave to meet up with Simmons. Shortly after this, the BSAA Alpha team are attacked by a huge snake BOW, which one by one takes out their entire team apart from Chris, Piers, and Marco. Anyway, they kill the monster. However, after surviving this horrific BOW, Ada shoots Marco with a dart loaded with the C virus, and Marco turns into a chrysalid and then into a mutation called a Nesdo, which is a swarm of insects controlled by a queen. After destroying the queen and taking Marco's C4, they then go after Ada, who the BSAA say has been spotted at the harbour. Fighting their way through it, Chris and Piers are ambushed by another attack chopper, and after getting rid of it, they arrive at some sort of research centre. Whilst all this was happening, Leon and Helena are on a plane to China and it all kicks off. A couple of Lopotica are on board, and they infected all the passengers. Leon and Helena kill the creature, and Leon tries to control the plane, but it crash lands into Weiyip. Jake and Sherry saw the plane go down, as did Ada, and Jake and Sherry rush to investigate. They meet up with Leon and Helena, and Sherry learns the hard truth, in that Simmons is responsible for the outbreak. Sherry doesn't want to believe it, but whilst they are talking, Ustanak turns up. After a fight, Ustanak legs it, and an explosion separates the two groups. Sherry tells Leon and Helena where she'll be meeting Simmons. Hunnigan reaches out to Leon and tells him that the building Sherry was talking about is not far away. Leon and Helena have to pass through a market and they see Ada, and they follow her into the facility. But of course, Ada is being hunted by Chris and Piers, who open fire on her. With both parties evading traps set by Ada, Chris and Piers confront her. Chris is about to shoot her, but he's stopped by Leon. Leon and Chris fight, but then realise who each other are. Chris says Ada is working for Neo-Umbrella, and despite hearing this, Leon says that he'll protect her. Whilst they're talking, Ada throws a flash grenade and escapes. Leon tells Chris they want the same thing, to stop the attack, and Chris says the BSAA will go after Ada, and Leon and Helena will go after Simmons. Leaving the warehouse, Leon and Helena come across Simmons and his men. Sherry and Jake turn up, and Sherry asks Simmons if he is responsible, to which he admits his involvement. In his words, for the benefit of the United States and global security. He calls for his men to dispose of them. Sherry hands Leon the drive with the information regarding the C virus and how to stop it, and the two groups separate again. Leon and Helena continue to go after Simmons, but Jake and Sherry are captured by a group of Dravo and imprisoned at an underwater oil field. But whilst his men are distracted, Simmons is injected with the C virus by Dravo and starts to mutate, saying, "She got me." Let's take a short break from the plot and discuss a name that's cropped up a few times now, and that is the Family. The Family is a secret fraternity, or shadow organisation founded sometime between 1685 and 1815. This was a real-life period of time known as the Enlightenment period, an intellectual and philosophical movement which focused largely on global influence amongst other things. This is thought to be the time in which the Illuminati was started. In this case, the Family had very deep pockets, and the founders of this particular secret society were the Simmons family. Yep, that's right, Derek Simmons' family. Their base, or rather their headquarters, was based in Tall Oaks, accessed through, you guessed it, a secret entrance in the Tall Oaks Cathedral. The family had their own goal, bioweapons development, and it goes deeper. Simmons, being a US government official, was actually the one that ordered the strike on Raccoon City in 1998. The family then, after the Raccoon City incident, redirected their goals fully towards bioweapons development. Simmons, still in the US government, became National Security Advisor to President Adam Benford, and the two were actually good friends. That wasn't until Benford became an enemy of the family and Simmons. The reason? Well, Benford decided to consider releasing the details and the classified information regarding the Raccoon City incident.
Everything we know about the Raccoon City incident.
But sir,
A lot of people are questioning my desire to reveal the truth. I know where they're coming from. It might create more problems than it solves. A lesson I learned well in the military. Bioorganic weapons are a global threat, and we are partly to blame. We have to come clean and start working with the rest of the world if we want to have any chance of fighting this.
whatever you decide, sir, I'm with you.
I've always valued your friendship, Leon. It's time we take responsibility and end this mess.
The family thought that the damage to the US, and also the risk of exposing the combat data from the US Army operation in Raccoon City to potential enemies would be too much, and the family considered that an act of treason. Simmons concocted a plan to take out President Adam Benford and covered it up as a bioterror attack, and you'll recall he'd used Helena's sister as leverage to get her to carry out the plan. But back to it. Chris and Piers use a gambit to catch up with Ada, ending up on a ship in the docks. Fighting through the ship, they confront Ada on the ship's bridge, and Ada tells them her plan was to spread the C virus around the entire world. Basically Raccoon City 2.0, but this time, a global event. She tells them that the aircraft carrier is preparing for launch and is equipped with missiles loaded with the C virus, which will be launched shortly. One of Simmons' men turns up in a chopper and shoots Ada, and she falls to her death. She dropped her suitcase, which contains a sample of the virus. Chris tries to warn the BSAA that the terror attack was a diversion, and the real attack is to spread the virus globally. Leon and Helena catch up with Simmons, and after he heavily mutates into a dog-like creature, they defeat him. They fall into the river, and after getting to dry land, they discover the BSAA are escorting civilians of Wayup to somewhere else. Helena asks Leon if it's over, and he says that it is. They then hear that Sherry and Jake were abducted. They then realise that Jake is the key to stopping the C virus. After fighting their way through the carrier, Chris and Piers took control of a fighter jet in an attempt to stop the missile launch, but after fighting a huge BOW, they fail. Chris contacts Leon and tries to warn him, but it's too late. The missiles detonate over the city, unleashing the C virus on the population, and all hell breaks loose. Leon tells Chris that Sherry and Jake have been taken to the underwater oil field and asks him to help them. Leon breaks some shocking news to Chris. That Jake Muller is Albert Wesker's son, and that he has antibodies for the C virus. Chris breaks the news to Leon that Ada is dead. Leon silently grieves, and he and Helena try desperately to escape the C virus along with the BSAA. Fighting through hordes of infected, they get to a gambit and part ways with the BSAA soldier. They both get knocked out by an explosion from a gas tanker and wake to find chaos around them. They are confronted by an attack chopper, but to their surprise it's piloted by Ada, who helps them out. Leon and Helena escape down an alleyway, and after running from more explosions, they are rescued by the BSAA, who come to their aid in a chopper. One of the BSAA are infected, and Leon has to take control of the chopper, crash landing it in the lobby of a tower building. In the next room, they come face to face with Simmons, who is still alive. He is very mad at Ada for some reason, claiming she took Wesker's son away. He mutates again, this time into a dinosaur, and Leon and Helena defeat him once again with the help of Ada and her chopper, and she heads to the roof. Leon and Helena use an elevator to get to the roof, and yep, Simmons is back again. He destroys their elevator and they have to climb up the elevator cable. Ada is in the middle of fighting Simmons, and Leon ends up helping her. Ada stabs him in the torso and he falls into the fire below. Leon and Helena continue onto the roof, and surprise surprise they are ambushed by Simmons, who this time turns into a massive insect-like creature. Using an electricity rod they defeat him, and he falls to his death, being impaled on a spike. Ada left Leon and Helena a chopper along with a drive containing evidence that will prove their innocence, as remember, they've been framed for the murder of President Benford, and that evidence will prove Simmons' guilt. And they use the chopper to escape. So, Ada is good now? Let me explain. You'll have noticed that Ada was wearing blue, and at some points she was wearing red. Now, you could of course believe that there are two Adas, but that's not the case. Let's introduce ourselves to someone named as Carla Radames. Carla was a genius-level researcher who was working for Derek Simmons. At some point, Simmons had dealings with Ada Wong back in 1998. She used to work for him, but their dealings didn't end there. Simmons became infatuated with Ada after she rejected him. Simmons set up a secret project, Project Ada. He worked on kidnapping thousands of women and attempted something absolutely mental. He wanted to create another Ada. Carla began to work on and be the supervisor for Project Ada. It didn't go that well at first. More than 12,000 experiments over 10 years ended in failure, and it wasn't good news for Carla either. Simmons, somewhere along the line, realised that Carla's genetics were very similar to Ada's, and knowing full well that Carla was infatuated with him, Simmons convinced Carla to be the next test subject. She would be the final one. It worked. Carla became a chrysalid, and then she hatched. As Leon saw on the videotape, a perfect copy of Ada. Well, she would become a near-perfect copy. Simmons then began his work in programming Carla to be exactly like the real Ada Wong. He used and managed to retain Carla's love for him, and this ensured that she would never leave him like Ada did. Simmons gave her lots of power, a base and an army of soldiers, but something was brewing under the surface. Carla, due to having part of her being left inside her, began to have an internal conflict. She was furious at what Simmons had done to her, so she became determined to destroy everything that he had built. Carla then built the organization Neo Umbrella and set it up in China. During this time, she would create and perfect the C virus. She did this by obtaining a T. Veronica sample, and using the mutation characteristic from the progenitor virus, she developed a new variant of T. Veronica named T02. This is where Sherry came in. You'll recall that Sherry was taken by the US government. Well, while there, she was experimented on by Simmons and Carla. Using Sherry's G virus sample, Carla combined it with T02, and the C virus was developed. A virus that Carla at least considered to be the perfect virus. Now, a quick side note, this all happened in 2009. You remember what also happened in 2009? Chris killed Albert Wesker. With Wesker gone, Sherry was no longer under threat, so she was offered a job as a government agent reporting to Simmons, the National Security Advisor. Carla, meanwhile, would test her C virus out, and her testing ground was the Mahawa School, and as mentioned earlier, Chris and Piers got caught up in it. Anyway, after the trial stage, it all went pear-shaped for Simmons. Jake Muller became known to be the only person in the world with C virus antibodies thanks to his father, Wesker. This leads into Simmons sending Agent Birkin to get Jake so he is able to 1. Make sure a vaccine for the C virus was never produced, and 2. To potentially use Jake's blood to enhance the C virus even further. Simmons also sent Carla along to ensure that Jake really had C virus antibodies, and she was the one who gave him and the Edonian rebels the shot, which turned them into Joavo. Jake not being affected by the shot meant that he had the antibodies. When Jake and Sherry were being held captive by the family, Carla then developed the C virus into an enhanced version by using Jake's blood, which resulted in removal of the chrysalid phase. At some point in 2011, one of the researchers working for Carla was injected with the C virus as a test subject. He underwent this willingly as he was born with a weak body and was frail. He was happy with the results. He had renewed strength. A couple of days in, he lost his right arm in a lab accident, but his arm didn't regenerate properly. Now here's a slightly messed up detail. Ustanak viewed Carla as a mother of sorts, a savior too, given that she had given him power and strength. He would be programmed to capture Jake, as Carla planned to go against Simmons and capture him for herself, which explains why Ustanak was there in Adonia in 2012. But Carla's plan had a hitch, and it was all of her own making. For some reason, Carla decided to contact the real Ada Wong, but masked the call to appear as if it was coming from Simmons instead. She told Ada there's some information aboard a ship, which may be of interest to her. Ada arrived at the ship and, to her surprise, she's able to access everything there. She discovers information about herself and that her prints are on file, along with a video detailing what appears to be her being sent on a mission to capture Jake Muller. This confuses her. Quite why Carla chose to involve the real Ada isn't known. Maybe she just hated Ada. Maybe she wanted Ada to see what Simmons was really like. Anyway, Carla goaded Ada and told her all about Tall Oaks, and told her that she formed Neo Umbrella, and that the face of this organization, to the world at least, was Ada Wong, and that Ada would end up taking the blame for the terror attacks. So Ada went to Tall Oaks, and Ada assisted Leon and Helena, ventured into the lab underneath the cathedral, and found the videotape titled Happy Birthday Ada Wong. And of course it was a video of Simmons watching Carla's chrysalid hatching and the birth of Carla's Ada Wong. Realizing that it was Carla that had been calling her and not Simmons, Ada called Simmons and informed him of what Carla was really up to, and she destroyed the lab. As we saw, Ada then headed for China. Ada found documents on the aircraft carrier with details about why Carla became Ada 2.0 through Simmons' obsession with her. After Chris and Piers witnessed the death of Carla, who they of course still thought was Ada, they left the scene and Ada approached Carla. Turns out that Carla had injected herself with the C virus and transformed into a BOW. After freezing her with liquid nitrogen and shattering her, Ada escaped the carrier, which was sinking due to damage caused by Carla, and reached a helicopter, and she headed for Langxiang. That's when Ada helped Leon and Helena fight Simmons in his mutated form. Of course, Simmons didn't actually know that Carla was dead. He thought this real Ada was Carla. But back to the story. Hours later, Chris and Piers arrive at the entrance to the underwater oil field. Chris mentions that this war can't follow him forever, and it's been 3 years since he killed Wesker, and after they're finished with their mission, he's leaving the BSAA. They see a camera feed with Jake and Sherry detailing where they're being held, and Chris and Piers release them using the controls, and they make their way up to them. Around this time, Jake and Sherry get free and escape and come face to face with Chris and Piers. Chris and Jake have a tense confrontation after Chris tells Jake that he sees his father in him, and explains that he is the one who killed Alba Wesker back in 2009. Jake lets it go, but they end up finding the catalyst for Carla's master plan, a giant cocoon which will infect the entire world with the C virus if it hatches. Well, it does hatch, and out of it comes a BOW known as Chaos. Chris and Piers descend to defeat Chaos. Jake and Sherry start making their escape, but yep, Ustanak makes an appearance. They fight him, and Jake ends up in a fist fight with this absolute beefcake, and in the end, Ustanak falls into the lava. Jake and Sherry then use an unbelievably fast platform to escape to the surface through a tunnel, but Ustanak is not dead yet. He tries to attack them on their platform, and they shoot Ustanak through the heart, killing him for good this time, and they both manage to escape. Meanwhile, Ada, the real one, also in the underwater base, approaches a chrysalid, which is in the process of hatching. So she destroys it, ensuring that whatever it is can never come to be. Chris and Piers engage and fight Chaos. They run to escape the pursuing BOW, but Piers is grabbed and thrown, and his arm is badly damaged. It gets worse for him as the BOW throws an object, pinning his arm against the wall. Chris is grabbed this time, and Piers frees himself by ripping what's left of his arm off, and uses the earlier obtained C virus sample, injecting himself. This mutates him, and he uses this new strength and power to save Chris. They fight and defeat Chaos. Piers is in bad shape and is turning fast. They both attempt to escape. Their facility is falling apart due to the water pressure, and they eventually make it to the escape pods. Piers knows he's screwed, and he pushes Chris into the pod and launches it, leaving himself behind. Chaos certainly isn't letting this go though, and swims to attack Chris's escape pod. Piers to the rescue though, and he uses his power to kill Chaos for good, allowing Chris to actually escape the facility while it blows up. In the aftermath of all of this, Helena is visiting her sister Deborah's grave, and Leon and Hunnigan turn up. Thinking that she's going to be taken into custody for her role in the terror attacks, she's let go due to the fact that she was forced by Simmons. As for Chris, after the death of Piers, he's enjoying a meal in Eastern Europe. He went back on his desire to quit the BSAA in honour of Piers. A colleague comes over to Chris and tells him they have a new mission. Jake, well, he softened a bit after his adventures in Edonia and China. Initially having asked for $50 million for his blood, he dropped the asking price to $50 and devoted his life to helping others, and at some point he appears to be aiding a village or town by fighting some BOWs. The following year, in 2014, Chris had been brought into Mexico and was to supervise a sting operation against an arms dealer by the name of Glenn Arias. It's thought that he is in possession of and has been dealing bioweapons, specifically during the civil war in Syria. A secondary objective is to search for a missing BSAA agent who has been in deep cover called Kathy White, along with her son Zach. Touching down in Querétaro, they search an abandoned mansion and they encounter a young boy who is a zombie and he attacks some of the men. Chris hears the commotion and goes up to investigate and finds Kathy's son Zach is the zombified boy. One of the men gets bitten and Chris sees him mutate in a way he's never seen before. Taking the guy down, he's now the sole survivor of the unit. Chris jumps outside via the window, hurting himself, and finds Glenn Arias there, and they fight. Arias then reveals he has a massive BOW there, alongside a mysterious woman, and also Kathy is there zombified, and seemingly under the control of Arias. He leaves the zombies to attack an injured Chris, but he's saved by a BSAA support, who gun down all the zombies, including Kathy. Holding her dead body, Chris screams as the mansion is destroyed. 4 months later, Rebecca Chambers, who after leaving STARS and Raccoon City long before it's destroyed, is now working as a virologist at the Alexander Institute of Biotechnology. She has been busy researching a cure for the virus Chris encountered at the mansion in Mexico. A virus which has now been called the A virus, which is short for the animality virus. She'd found that it stays dormant unless activated by a specific trigger. There are 3 layers or components to the virus, which are the base virus, the triggering virus, and the vaccine. At some point, the mysterious woman from the mansion shows up and launches a bioterror attack on the university labs, releasing an aerosolized A virus into the ventilation system. Rebecca gets hit with this too, but she manages to stumble to inject herself with a vaccine, and she is okay. Being attacked by her colleagues, she is eventually saved by Chris and his BSAA squad, and later on she tells him that this virus shows similarities to Las Plagas. Now that she knows her prototype vaccine works, she suggests they send it to other labs ASAP so they can get it mass produced. Chris tells Rebecca a bit about Glenn Arias, that he took over Neo Umbrella and TRICELL's operations. He's selling the weapons they created to crime syndicates and, as mentioned, countries at war. Chris thinks Arias targeted her lab to destroy Rebecca's research. Chris says that since the A virus has similarities to Las Plagas, they should go and ask an expert's opinion, so they fly over to Colorado. Meeting up with Leon, he's getting drunk. You see, not long before this, he was leading a team of DSO agents in Maryland, and they were there to capture and question a senator who had been giving sensitive and classified information to the family. Essentially, the whole team, bar Leon, were wiped out by booby-trapped vehicles, and losing his entire team has caused him to fall into a hole of despair. Chris lambasts Leon for his drinking so early in the day, and Leon tells him that he's not interested in any job they've got, as he's currently on vacation. Rebecca tells him they need intel, but meanwhile they are being observed by Arias. He tells the mysterious woman, whose name is Maria, that Rebecca is to stay alive, and that she should kill the rest. Hearing about this new A virus causes Leon to feel like he's stuck in a loop. Fighting and fighting, but things just keep getting worse and worse. Chris tells him that Arias had a smart bomb dropped on his wedding by the US government, and he lost his family, including his new wife. He wants revenge. Chris and Leon start arguing again, and Rebecca sets them straight. She takes a sample of her blood, saying the virus is in each and every one of them, that it needs a specific trigger to be activated. She says that her blood has antibodies, and that if she dies, to get the sample of her blood to a lab they can trust. With Rebecca going to the bathroom, Maria launches her attack and kidnaps her. A man runs into the room, and Leon immediately identifies him as Patricio, pinning him to the wall. Leon says that Patricio is the one who got his entire team killed in Maryland. He says that his family is in danger, and this is because he had contact with Glenn Arias, as Patricio is thought to be, or used to be, a member of Los Illuminados, who of course provided Arias with plaga samples for research, as Los Illuminados wanted revenge against the US too. At this point, the massive BOW fires upon the lodge using a Gatling gun, and Patricio is killed. They see Rebecca has been abducted by Arias, and Leon is now on board with a mission. After a heartbreaking call with who is now Patricio's widow, who calls to speak with her husband, they get ready to move out. Meanwhile, Rebecca comes too and is wearing a wedding dress, and in the room, set up like a wedding, there are crates there, which clearly have something squirming around inside them. Arias himself walks in and says that these are the reanimated remains of his friends and family members that were killed at his wedding. Rebecca then tells Arias all about his A virus, that his BOWs know who they're supposed to attack and who they are not, which is a great selling point. She mentions the 3 strains of the virus: infect, trigger, choose target. Rebecca had studied the locations of the bioterror attacks in the US, and they were all concentrated around the Great Lakes. Arias had mixed the base virus with the drinking water. This happened by accident though. In rare cases, the latent virus can activate without the trigger virus. The trigger virus is distributed through the air, gas, just like in the lab. When the latent virus, water, and the trigger virus, gas, are combined, they become an effective, controllable bioweapon. Back on the chopper, Leon theorizes Arias vaccinates anyone he doesn't want infected before spreading the gas. It's how he can control an outbreak. Rebecca tells Arias that she engineered a cure already, so his product will soon be obsolete on the black market. However, Arias says that her cure is incomplete, as he claims that if it was complete, then Rebecca wouldn't have been attacked after she took it. Arias says that tomorrow the world will be a very different place. Leon pulls a memory card out of Patricio's phone, and he knew a lot about it. The kill target at the lodge was not Leon or Chris, it was Patricio. Now for the reason Rebecca is wearing a wedding dress, well, he pulls up a picture of his wife, Sarah, and his family. His wife looks exactly like Rebecca. The resemblance is uncanny. Next to her is the big BOW and Maria, who is the big guy's daughter. A worried Rebecca asks what this means, and Arias says that he's redoing the wedding, and Rebecca will marry him. He grabs his dead wife's arm, Rebecca resists, Arias hits her, and tells her that he's going to attach Sarah's dead arm to Rebecca. Having loaded up all the data on Patricio's memory card, they learn that Arias is going to spread the trigger virus gas all over New York City. It says that any tanks labeled with the green A are the vaccine, but the location is classified. Leon then surmises that Arias would keep all of the vaccine canisters at his New York hideout. At the hideout, Maria speaks with her father named Diego. The plan to spread the virus is a go, and she joins others in jumping into tankers and driving them into the city. Pulling up, they activate the gas and people immediately turn, having drunk the water from the Great Lakes at some point. The city quickly descends into chaos. The BSAA sent gifts, and Leon gets dibs on the bike. Moving through the streets, they locate the first tanker. As the virus cannot handle heat and it'll just burn up, Leon throws a grenade underneath the tanker and it blows up. Unfortunately, there are Cerberus dogs in the van accompanying the tanker, and one of the BSAA crew, Damien, is killed. Leon leads the dogs away from the bike, leaving Chris to blow up the rest of the tankers. Whilst all this is going on, Rebecca is being prepped for this grim procedure. Arias tells Rebecca that the new version of the trigger virus is actually stronger now, thanks to Rebecca's blood. The gas can't be used anymore though, so the researcher there injects her with it. Arias says that it'll start working in half an hour, and Rebecca starts to react to the virus. Blowing up one of the tankers, it appears that the BSAA managed to kill Maria, so that's a bonus. Chris heads for the hideout and arrives, hearing Arias telling him that Rebecca has 20 minutes left now until she turns. Arias sets many traps in the form of zombies in an attempt to stop Chris, but Leon shows up in order to help. Eventually, Chris finds Rebecca, and after he's dealt with Diego by cooking him with an incendiary, he forces the researcher there to tell him where the vaccine is kept. Helping Rebecca to the roof, Chris sets her down as he gets caught in a firefight with Arias, and this results in a hand-to-hand fight on a glass roof, resulting in Chris letting Arias punch him in the face a few times so he can shatter the glass, with Arias falling through it, and he goes splat on the ground below. A still alive Diego approaches the dying Arias, and he tells the beast it's time to unleash it, and Diego mutates, fusing with Arias. With Chris still trying to help Rebecca, the mutant Arias grabs Chris, trying to squeeze him to death, and Leon once again shows up and saves the day. Leon fights the beast while Chris goes to get the vaccine for Rebecca, as she only has about 3 minutes left. He manages to find it. Now Leon is grabbed by Arias, who nearly kills Leon, but the BSAA show up and Nadia uses a railgun to shoot Arias, and this frees Leon. Arias then launches himself at the BSAA Osprey, and Leon uses the bike, launching it at Arias and shooting the gas tank. He isn't done yet though, as he uses long claws to grab onto the side of a building, so Chris turns up and buries a grenade round straight into his exposed heart. Goodbye, Glenn Arias. Chris managed to hook Rebecca up to the vaccine and she begins to breathe easily now that she's cured. Chris says that they have one more thing left to do, and that is to distribute the vaccine across the city, and people there are reverted back to their normal state. Chris, Leon and Rebecca then talk about what's next, now that they've made the world a little bit safer. However, Maria is revealed to still be alive, as she picks up her father's mask and she looks very, very angry. But that's it for part 2 of the Resident Evil series explained. A little bit longer than part 1, but there was a lot more to cover in this one than that one. If you enjoyed this one, then please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, but for now, take care and I'll see you in the next part, which will drop after Resident Evil 9 Requiem is released.